Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.
Page 1. One Piece. I'll copy Luffy at the top and save Ace, author, passionate about meat. Summary. A story of following the ship, slice-of-life scenes, adventures with the main characters, and comedy. Thanks for your support. Sumu unexpectedly enters the world of One Piece. Coincidentally arriving at Marineford during the war, he awakens the God Hand, which allows him to copy and enhance the abilities of anyone he touches. And so, a commotion arose at the top. Akainu, where did this kid come from? How come his abilities are the same as mine? Garp, his armament haki is actually stronger than mine. Hawkeye, you should be the world's greatest swordsman. Blackbeard, how many devil fruits did you eat? Finally, Luffy grinned at Sumu, revealing 2 rows of teeth. Luffy, bowl cutter, I've decided you're my crewmate. Chapter 1. Is this the Marineford War? Numb. So numb. Brain storage area. An endless numbness spread through Sumu's body. Brain filter. P.S. Blackbeard will be wiped out, and Whitebeard will die from plot-induced death. After all, strong individuals like him can only die on the battlefield. The abilities of God's Hand cannot be stacked, only combined. If you can't accept this, then don't continue reading. Sumutu was in excruciating pain, and everything went black before his eyes. Recalling what had just happened, he only regretted that he had been so impulsive. Sumu was originally in Shaorizai country attending an exhibition of the world's most popular anime, One Piece. I looked at a Luffy figurine covered in colorful lights and couldn't help but go over and touch it. Unexpectedly, the Luffy figure actually blinked. In his shock, the colored lights suddenly lost power, and a surge of electricity instantly enveloped him. In an instant, I felt the world spinning and darkness descending. It's really numb. Sumu cursed loudly. After calming down a bit, his vision and hearing returned, and he could hear the whistling wind in his ears. He opened his eyes, hoping that someone in the exhibition would call 120 for emergency medical assistance. But where can you find a cool exhibition? What came into view was a battlefield filled with the sounds of gunfire and the sparks flying everywhere. Where the hell am I? Sumu couldn't help but cry out in alarm. His face changed drastically, and he was about to wet his pants. Have I traveled to another time? Having read the novel and watched the movie, Sumu, who had some understanding of the subject, immediately had this idea. Where have I transmigrated to? Where's my cheat system? Where's the system? A series of questions arose. Sumu never imagined that he, a bright and intelligent college student, would encounter such a thing. The sounds of artillery fire rang out incessantly, the shouts of soldiers echoed across the battlefield, weapons clashed, and smoke filled the air. When a broken blade flew in and spun around, embedding itself a centimeter below Sumu's crotch, cold sweat instantly covered his entire body. Damn it, this almost led to our family line dying out. Sumu jolted awake, quickly stood up, and suddenly realized that he was on the battlefield. You have to understand that modern college students are powerless. If they don't come up with a solution, they'll just have to wait to die. Also, which battlefield did he travel to? The Battle of Guandu? The Battle of Red Cliffs? No, there were cannons on this battlefield. As Sumu ran, he caught sight of the warrior unleashing various special effects and skills, and immediately froze. Is this some kind of magical world? But then he saw a familiar, huge building with 2 large black characters and a seagull icon printed on it. Navy. Sumu froze. Wait. He suddenly looked around. The familiar skull and cross flag hanging on the ship, the frozen sea, and the sea that poured in but was frozen solid. The Moby Dick, the Whitebeard pirates, the Ice Age. And also, Sumu glanced at a high platform, where a shirtless man was kneeling. It could be vaguely seen that he was wearing a string of Buddhist beads around his neck, his muscles were taut, and there was a pattern on his back that looked like the pirate flag. Ace. This is the Marineford War. Sumu shouted. That's right. This is the most exciting battle from his favorite anime, One Piece. The Marineford War. Originally a die-hard One Piece fan, Sumu never imagined that the Little Life exhibition would be so magical, actually transporting him to the Marineford War. When the 2-dimensional structure was transformed into 3-dimensional, Sumu didn't recognize it at first. Where's my system? Don't all transmigrators have systems? System, where the hell are you? Dead. Sumu shouted, but despite his flamboyant movements, no pirates or marines noticed him. But if the system still doesn't respond, he'll really die. He then lay down next to a corpse, feigning death to avoid any disturbance. There was no other way. He was only 20 years old. He wanted to live, and pretending to be dead wasn't shameful. We're here, what's the rush? Sure enough, an impatient voice echoed in Sumu's mind. If you don't urge me soon, I'll be dead. Don't worry, with me here, you won't die. Young master, aren't you the system? That's just a vulgar name used by you humans. Damn system, shut up and give me superpowers, or I'll die and you won't live either. Sumu couldn't help but curse. Alright, I'll get straight to the point. Congratulations on being chosen by this young master and transmigrating to your favorite One Piece world. And you'll also experience the Marineford War, which you find most exciting. Congratulations, damn it, congratulations. Sumu gritted his teeth and cursed, you left me, an ordinary person, in the Marineford War. And you're so late, what's there for me to be happy about? Recalling how he had almost lost his ability to have children, Sumu felt a wave of fear and anger. Huh, you're not happy. Think about it, with my help, you can have Nami on your left arm, Boa Hancock on your right, and Robin sitting in the middle. Aren't you happy? I remember you used to deal with them quite a bit. Hearing this, Sumu blushed, but the explosion that rang in his ears again pulled him back to reality. Alright, let's get down to business. Alright, I'll give you the ability now. Ding. Successfully transmigrated and received a newbie gift pack, Nami's photo book. Upon hearing this voice, Sumu was initially delighted, then froze. Oh, that's all. That's all. What else do you want from the newbie gift pack? Fine, I'll give you a Robin one too, really. Damn it. I'm about to kick the bucket on the battlefield. What kind of nonsense are you writing? You're such a fool. Sumu was speechless when he heard the voice in his mind. Just as he was about to explode in anger, a massive impact engulfed him, sending him flying. Sumu felt dizzy and disoriented, and crashed heavily to the ground, seeing stars. Who was out of stock and hit him? When I opened my eyes, I saw a man wearing a black hat, a flamboyant-looking cloak with a bare chest, carrying a large knife, and sporting a small mustache. He was staring intently at the person in front of him whose body was covered in diamonds. Hawkeye my hawk. Diamond Yoza. Sumu gasped. The two people in front of him were domineering and terrifying, just like characters from the One Piece anime. Page 2. The world's greatest swordsman, Hawkeye my hawk, and Diamond Yoza, the 3rd Division commander of the Whitebeard pirates. Just now, it was just a shockwave from Hawkeye's slash, but it felt like Sumu had been hit by a truck. Hawkeye my hawk. Don't even think about getting near daddy. Yozu withstood Hawkeye's slash, a smile appearing on his face as he looked at Hawkeye and spoke. Hawkeye slowly twisted the hilt of his sword, his eyes still sharp, and muttered, it completely blocked my attack. Sumu, dragging his aching body, sat quietly on the ground, on the verge of tears. How did I run into such a big shot right away? These two better not start fighting, or I'll die first as a sign of respect. Young master, I beg you, please grant me your power. Sumu started to plead and beg. He didn't want to become the worst transmigrator in history, dying as soon as he arrived. Okay. Oh, I forgot, I'm sorry, host, I only gave you the newbie gift pack but not the abilities. Listen carefully, my ability is to give you the ability of a character from an anime, movie, novel, or comic that you've seen in your original world every day. Huh, what? Sumu was stunned. The character's abilities? Does that mean he could acquire all the abilities of the characters in all the comics, novels, and anime he's read? From Zeno, who destroyed the universe in Dragon Ball Super, to Grey Wolf from I'll Be Back. If he draws a bad character, wouldn't he die in the very first episode of the Marineford War? Of course, the host can lock in abilities by completing tasks. If you don't like the one you draw, you can still use the one you drew yesterday. Now, this young master will extract the first day's abilities for the host. Upon hearing this, Sumu jumped up. Wait a minute, let me do it myself. Before he could finish speaking, a ding sounded in his mind. Congratulations, host, you have gained the ability, Hand of God. This young master hopes the host has a pleasant start. Remember to check out the photos. Bye bye, I'm going to rest now. The voice in his mind dissipated, and Sumu's body emitted a faint light as a subtle power flowed into his mind. God's hand. By touching another person, you can copy all their abilities and enhance them, and you can copy them multiple times. Skills don't stack, they can only be used together. The Hand of God. Sumu forgot which comic this was from, but he vaguely remembered that this ability was very powerful. Sumu opened his eyes, a glimmer of light flashing deep within them. He looked at the battlefield engulfed in gunfire, swallowed hard, and was troubled again. He has incredible abilities, but, to touch it with his hands, it seems that this single requirement alone is enough to stump him. In a high-level situation like the Marineford War, who could a mere admiral like Akainu, who could be killed with a single snot of his nose, possibly challenge? Sumu even felt that it was already an amazing thing that he was able to survive the attack of the world's #1 swordsman, Hawkeye. He glanced around, cold sweat beading on his forehead. Smoke filled the air, screams of pirates and marines echoed in turn, and a faint smell of blood permeated the air. Who could let him rub against them? He really just wants to rub against them. Let him rub against it. Just as Sumu was anxiously searching for his target, he felt the sky above suddenly brighten. Looking up, the blinding yellow light caused a sharp pain in his head. He was a sleazy-looking middle-aged man wearing a navy cape with a yellow lining. Monkey D. Kizaru. Sumu was shocked. Sure enough, the person appearing not far above him was none other than Marine Admiral Kizaru. What kind of people has he met since he first arrived? The world's greatest swordsman, a naval admiral. This damn system is really killing me. Fortunately, Kizaru's attention was clearly not on Sumu. His gaze was fixed on the Moby Dick, which was not far from Sumu. Following Kizaru's gaze, Sumu saw a majestic, imposing, and enormous body. He held a knife in one hand, wore a black hat and a white cloak, looking incredibly imposing, with several scars on his chest that revealed his kingly aura. Old man bye. Sumu squinted and couldn't help but exclaim again. When he watched One Piece, he loved calling Whitebeard Old Man Whitebeard. Edward Newgate. To be honest, he really liked this man who was known as the strongest in the world. Unfortunately, in Sumu's memory, Old Man Bye died on the battlefield in the end. Sumu looked at Kizaru. That kid was up to no good. Yellow light was emanating from his body. What was he trying to do to Whitebeard? 8-foot beautiful Magatama. A weak, feeble voice rang out, and countless beams of yellow laser light erupted from Kizaru's body. The scene was absolutely spectacular, with yellow lasers filling the sky. Sumu stared blankly at the sky filled with yellow laser beams, then his expression changed drastically, and he couldn't help but shout, "You son of a bitch. Is this Kizaru's 8-foot-long outline jewel?" Sumu felt the terrifying power within the laser, his face turned pale instantly, and only one thought flashed through his mind. Dodge. You absolutely have to dodge. Getting hit means certain death. 10 of them wouldn't be enough to survive. But his god's hand hadn't even started copying yet. He was powerless to dodge. Outline it for me, outline it, outline it. Sumu simply closed his eyes, screamed inwardly, and squatted down, clutching his head with both hands. This damned war keeps him constantly on his toes. While watching the Marineford War, I felt it was thrilling, but now that I'm on the battlefield, Sumu realizes how cruel and oppressive it is. Right now, if he's not careful, that laser will definitely turn his body into pieces like a sniper bullet. But the pain he imagined never came. Sumu trembled and slowly opened his eyes. A blue flame was burning in the air, blocking all the yellow lasers. At that moment, the blue phoenix appeared like a god in Sumu's eyes. Holy crap! Little Ma! Sumu burst into tears of joy. The one who blocked the attack was none other than Marco, the Phoenix, the 1st Division commander of Whitebeard. Thank goodness for you, horse. In just a few minutes, Sumu had already encountered so many people. Hawkeye, Marco, Yozo, Kizaru, Whitebeard, Fairy, all top-tier characters. The Marineford War was indeed incredibly chaotic. Having managed to survive for the time being, Sumu wiped the sweat from his forehead and immediately stood up. He needs to get closer to the Moby Dick, otherwise the Navy will kill him. It's not that the Navy is unjust. On this battlefield, apart from the 7 warlords of the sea, anyone not wearing a Navy uniform is treated as a pirate. Sumu doesn't have a Navy uniform, so he's a complete pirate. If we stay here, we'll either be blown up by artillery fire or stabbed to death by the approaching Navy. Just as Sumu was approaching the Moby Dick, a man in a naval uniform carrying a scimitar suddenly blocked his way. Damn the Whitebeard pirates, die. Chapter 2, Survival is the most important thing. Damn the Whitebeard pirates, die. A naval soldier blocked Sumu's path, cursed loudly, and thrust his gleaming knife at him. Sumu's expression changed drastically. While reaching out to stop him, he quickly turned away to avoid it. Surprisingly, he actually dodged it. Okay. Sumu was slightly stunned and puzzled. Was my reaction that fast? Could it be that my constant finger exercises have actually trained me? That shouldn't be the case. In this world, even the naval grunts in the Marineford War are no match for him. Why does this cut look so soft and weak? He looked up at the Navy man and saw that the latter was panting heavily, his white clothes covered in blood. Page 3. The overall impression is one of decadence. Oh. Sumu suddenly realized what was going on, and pointed at the Navy officer, shouting, "So this is a big cripple. Damn, pirates, die." The Navy officer let out a weak shout and swung his sword again. This was the first time Sumu had experienced the taste of battle. He smiled and confidently turned around. He's just a minor cripple. If he, a respectable young man of our time, can't even beat him, then it's truly laughable. Little Navy. Unexpectedly, as soon as he took a step, Sumu felt a subtle force on the sole of his foot, and his foot nimbly slid backward. Fuck. Sumu's expression changed drastically, he cried out in alarm, and lost his balance, falling forward. The Navy's blade then cleaved towards the titanium alloy skull. Boom. Fortunately, because Sumu leaned forward too much, the blade didn't strike him, but the hilt hit his forehead hard. Ouch. Sumu supported Haijun with one hand, enduring the pain while trying his best to maintain his balance and not fall. This severely damaged Navy still possesses such strength. Even without a broken skin, his forehead is already covered in bumps. His damaged handsome appearance is unlikely to win over Empress Nami's heart. Damn pirates, let me go. The Navy gritted his teeth and growled, twisting his sword to adjust it as he prepared to stab Sumu. Upon hearing this, a look of anxiety flashed in Sumu's eyes. In a panic, he He tried to get up, but was stopped by the arm of a naval officer. His expression changed. A sense of crisis was creeping in. Damn it, sixth brother. Let go. Huh. Sumu was stunned as he looked at the hand that was touching the navy in front of him. Then, he looked up and glanced at the navy. A surprised smile and suddenly widened eyes appeared at the same time. Oh. You're in big trouble. Sumu shouted, Hand of God. With his command, a current of electricity was released from Sumu's palm and instantly swept across the entire body of the navy. After a short while, the current flowed back into Sumu's hand. Ding! God's hand successfully copied. Learned the 6 styles of the navy. Shave. Iron body. As a voice echoed in his mind, Sumu felt a qualitative change occur in his body. He felt more invincible and more powerful than ever before. Without a doubt, if this navy man in front of me were in the real world, I could take on 10 of him. Especially that invincible iron block that gets beaten up. With the ability in hand, Sumu's eyes narrowed, and with a quick crouch and a sweeping leg kick, he took down the Marine. The Navy officer's expression changed, and he fell heavily to the ground. He was seriously injured and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes trembled slightly. What kind of move was this? Sumu not only copied the Navy's abilities, but also their physical attributes, which made him feel incredibly powerful. Sumu's lips curled up slightly, and he raised his foot to stomp down, but he hesitated when he saw the miserable state of the Navy. Although war cannot be controlled by a saint, it must be remembered that just a few hours ago he was a good young man who had never seen bloodshed. His upbringing made it difficult for him to bring himself to kill. Right now it wouldn't be something he could do in a short time. Thinking about it, Sumu sighed and looked at the Navy, who no longer had the strength to stand up. He shook his head with his hands behind his back, exuding the profound wisdom of a master. Today, I will spare your life for now, hoping you will repent and start anew. No, the Navy seems to be the one in the public's eyes who is righteous. Shouldn't we say that to the pirates? Sumu shook his head, quickly regaining his senses, and stopped paying attention to the Navy, glancing at the Moby Dick again. Just then, Diamond Jaws punched into the ice and grabbed a block of ice the size of a small mountain with both hands. What? Jaws roared and hurled the ice block at a high platform. My darn thing. Upon seeing this, Sumu couldn't help but curse, his eyes widening in disbelief. This guy was a real tough guy. Having just gained the ability and feeling invincible, he finally came to a complete understanding of himself. That ability was indeed invincible for someone who had been weak for so long. But you must understand, this is the world of pirates. That Navy guy's abilities would probably be so low that he wouldn't last a single move against this group. You still can't let yourself get carried away. Sumu swallowed hard and looked at the person sitting calmly on the high platform where the ice block had been thrown. Sumu squinted and saw a man in a red undershirt, with his legs crossed and his mouth turned down like a lapdog. Akainu. Sumu recognized Akainu at a glance. Even if it were a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional representation, he could recognize him instantly. This guy only has absolute justice in his heart, and in the Marineford War, it was he who punched the fuse of the war to death Ace. After Ace's death, Sumu harbored a great deal of hatred for Akainu. Akainu let out a cold snort, slowly stood up, his right fist suddenly turned red, and without changing his expression, he threw a punch at Iceberg. The scalding lava swiftly shattered and melted the iceberg, releasing a large amount of water vapor. The magma that shattered the iceberg didn't stop there. Like several meteors or thousands of arrows, it rushed down from the sky. Sumu's face turned pale again as he looked at the fireballs filling the sky. Come again? Kizuru just used the 8-foot edge dagger, and now you, Akainu, want to join in? Fine, then I'll die. Playing around as usual, Sumu stared intently at the magnificent yet dangerous move, Meteor Volcano. Fortunately, he had just copied and enhanced a skill, and relying on his perfect movement technique Shave, he barely managed to dodge 2 large fireballs that were hurtling towards him. However, the aftershocks of the fireball caused Sumu to roll twice solidly on the ice. It even bumped into a bloody corpse on the ground. Sumu could see that the people hit by the fireball were reduced to ashes. This made him gasp. Standing up, Sumu glared disapprovingly at Akainu, who had an expressionless face and treated human life like dirt. This guy can't distinguish friend from foe, unleashing such a wide-range killing move. It's absolutely disgusting. For Akainu, if he could annihilate the pirates, he would not hesitate to sacrifice the lives of the Marines. This meteor volcano attack caused numerous casualties among the weaker pirates. Whitebeard on the Moby Dick frowned and glanced at Akainu. This guy was giving him a bit of annoyance. However, he still did not join the battle. Although the 3 admirals of the opposing navy made some moves, they only made a brief appearance and then did not make any further moves. Whitebeard still stood tall at the bow of the Moby Dick, his gaze sweeping over the battlefield. Sumu looked at the white-bearded man from afar, and an idea came to mind. The Marineford War is too dangerous. Why doesn't he run to the side of the strongest man in the world? Putting everything else aside, Whitebeard is a man to be trifled with. As long as Sumu calls him dad, everything will be fine. Even if things go wrong, Whitebeard wouldn't lay a hand on him. Whitebeard wouldn't attack someone who poses no threat to him and has no hostility. He was a pirate, but not the kind who killed indiscriminately. And then, Sumu will see if he can find a chance to brush against the Whitebeard. If he does manage to. Akainu bastard, look me in the eye. Humph, that's right. With Whitebeard's abilities, everyone in this Marineford war except for Garp and Sengoku is a bastard. Akainu, no problem for him. Thinking it over, Sumu immediately ran towards the Moby Dick. Just then, the ground began to shake, and a huge black shadow appeared next to the Moby Dick. Page 4. Sumu struggled to steady himself and looked up in confusion. A shadowy figure appeared, a giant with 2 horns on its head, green skin, and a long sword in its hand. Little Oz. My goodness, he's so big. Sumu swallowed hard. Little Oz was even bigger than he had imagined. The fangs in its mouth and the skull necklace around its neck looked rather terrifying. Oz. Whitebeard was slightly taken aback when he saw the figure, then frowned. I advised you not to come to Marineford. Your body will be used as a target by these Marines. Whitebeard's eyes revealed a melancholy and helplessness. Oz and Ace had an extraordinary relationship. Perhaps Ace didn't understand gentleness when he was young, but he was definitely a warm-hearted and polite older brother when he grew up. Compared to Luffy, Ace's social skills were improved by Makino, while Luffy remained the same idiot. Ace was gentle not only to Luffy, but also to Oars. Because Ace didn't look at Oz with strange eyes, but instead knitted a straw hat just for Oz. Oz was no longer afraid of the summer heat or the winter cold, nor was he afraid of getting wet in the rain, which made him develop a strange affection for Ace. Therefore, Oars could not stand idly by while Ace was captured. You bunch of bastards, let Ace go. Oz roared, but the Navy's guns continued to fire at him. When Oars Jr. looked at Ace kneeling on the execution platform, anger was clearly evident in his eyes. When Sumu heard Oz's deep, heavy voice, which sounded like muffled thunder, his heart skipped a beat. It seemed that Little Oz's ending was not going to be good. When Sumu watched the summit, he learned about the story of Little Oars and Ace, and was deeply moved. When he saw Little Oz being beaten, he felt so sorry for him. Such a big body couldn't avoid the attack. In the end, Little Oars paid the ultimate price to save Ace. You gave me a straw hat, and I'll risk my life to save you. Sumu couldn't help but recall a sentence he had seen online, and sighed. As he ran toward the Moby Dick, he kept a close watch on the attacks around him. Little Oz is too radical. With Sumu's current abilities, he cannot save him. Although Sumu wants to, he cannot. He lowered his head, trying hard not to look at the terrible state Little Oz would be in later. Little Oz isn't made of steel. He takes big strides, but he also takes a lot of hits. The amount of blood on his face also increased. Ace, I'm here to save you. Little Oz roared loudly despite the pain. Sumu couldn't help but look over when he heard the sound. Little Oz had already arrived at the execution platform. Although he easily defeated the giants of the Navy and swept through passing ships, Oars was still no match for them when he actually stood before the execution platform. Because he encountered one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Kuma, Moria, Doflamingo. Sumu saw a dark-skinned, plump man with a fair complexion step forward, conjure a ball of flesh in his hands, and strike Oz. Immediately, a huge explosion was heard, making Sumu's ears ring. That's a tyrant, bear. Little Oz was already badly injured, crashing heavily to the ground. Hateful. Sumu cursed under his breath. Little Oz had gone too far, and no one could save him. Sumu finally reached the bottom of the Moby Dick. Perhaps because the Moby Dick is so big, it seems very close, but in reality, it's quite far when you run from it. There were quite a few pirates on the ship, and they didn't pay much attention to Sumu when they saw him. After all, it's normal to have some unfamiliar faces among so many pirates. They might be from other divisions or newcomers who have joined Whitebeard's crew. Just as Sumu was about to board the ship, he heard another huge scream coming from Oz's direction. Upon hearing this, Sumu's expression changed, and he looked over with a heavy heart. Oz's right leg was cut off by Doflamingo, who was wearing a pink coat, with silk threads, and blood was flowing freely. Even from a distance, the wounds are still shocking. Sumu took a deep breath. Although Oz's right leg had been severed, his body still stubbornly moved towards Ace on the execution platform. Ace, standing on the stage, was already in tears, looking at Oz with heartache. But it wasn't over yet. Sumu then saw the Moonlight Moria, who was as black and white as an old ghost, emerge and laugh as it used its shadow to create sharp spikes that pierced through Oz's body. At that moment, Oz's body finally stopped. Oz's eyes rolled back as he stretched out a trembling hand toward the execution platform. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Ace, wait for me a little longer, it's almost there. Oz's gradually fading voice was swallowed up by the shouts of war, and the giant green hand stopped in front of Ace's face. Finally, as countless people fell on the battlefield because of their own stance, Oz also fell, his massive body collapsing before the execution platform. That's right, Doflamingo is right. There is no absolute good or evil on this battlefield. Justice is defined by the victor. On the execution platform, Ace, with tears welling in his eyes, shouted at the top of his lungs, Oars. Seeing this scene from afar, Sumu couldn't help but grit his teeth. As expected, Oz fell down. If his god hand had copied Whitebeard's abilities, he wouldn't mind saving Oars, but unfortunately, he's still a weakling. Or's junior sacrifice was not in vain. With this behemoth clearing the way, a large number of pirates surged forward and stormed into the bay. Sumu continued to tug at the hull of the Moby Dick, trying to climb aboard. He didn't care about war or anything like that. The most important thing right now was to save his life. Save yourself first, rather than saving others. It's obvious that going to Whitebeard's side would save your life. Just then, Sumu heard a loud shout, and then a dark shadow blocked out the sun above his head. Chapter 3 Hello, Wong Luffy. Looking up, I saw a naval warship that had somehow appeared out of the sky. The one shouting at the front was a boy wearing a straw hat, a yellow shirt, red shorts, and super large flip-flops. He was followed by all sorts of people. While Sumu was still in a daze, the warship had already fallen into the large crater that Jaws had broken earlier, splashing water everywhere. What is this? And who has come? And many more. If he remembered correctly, what appeared now should be. Sumu squinted at the figure that he had used as his phone and computer wallpaper countless times. His eyes widened immediately, and a look of surprise appeared in them. Luffy. That's right, the protagonist of One Piece, Luffy, was sitting on that warship that just disembarked. Sumu knew that the people behind him were the group that Luffy had just taken from Impel Down. Except for Xiao Feng, it seems that everyone else escaped. Crocodile, Ivankov, Jinbe, Buggy the Great. Sumu swallowed hard. The main character had entered the scene, and he roughly knew how far the war at the summit was going. The war at Marineford has only just begun. That is, not long after the Whitebeard pirates entered the fray. Keep in mind that with Luffy joining the battle, he will have a significant role to play later on. Damn, I have to climb up and rub my Whitebeard against him right now. With a sense of urgency in his eyes, Sumu struggled to climb towards the top of the Moby Dick. He knew the cruelty behind the war. If he hadn't used his superpowers to copy some skills, he definitely wouldn't have survived. Unfortunately, he can't fly, and the Moby Dick is too high, which is a bit of a challenge for him. Ace. Page 5. Suddenly, an extremely long shout rang out, piercing through the battlefield. Okay. Oh shit. Startled by the shout, Sumu trembled and, halfway up the boat, lost his footing and fell off. He climbed up from the ice, wondering why getting on a boat was so difficult. He looked up. That was Luffy standing at the highest point of the ship, shouting at Ace on the execution platform. Luffy. Ace also saw Luffy, and his expression immediately changed, an indescribable look appearing on his face. Luffy's shout was powerful enough to immediately attract the attention of many pirates. Even Garp on the execution platform, upon seeing Luffy arrive, had his eyes bulge out and clutched his head, thinking something was wrong. Neither of these two brothers is easy to deal with. Humph. Hero Garp's grandson, the son of Revolutionary Army Dragon, must also be eliminated. Akainu stared at Luffy, his eyes filled with undisguised killing intent. The various naval forces were also intimidated by the sheer number of Luffy's crew, which included pirates, prisoners, the Revolutionary Army, and former Shishibukai. How did they manage to gather this group of people? Knowing the script, Sumu was not surprised at all. He was only concerned about his own life. Fortunately, no one has noticed me yet. Although he's at the top, he's used to being the sixth person in the family. He could ambush someone from the bushes above and take them down in a single combo, or sweep them around a corner with a gun. In this way, Sumu actually honed his skills as Lao Lu. However, Sumu looked at Luffy and muttered to himself. Luffy, don't come over here yet. Wait until he's finished rubbing against Whitebeard before you come over. He remembered that Luffy was going to come to Whitebeard's side to report the Navy's plan to execute Ace ahead of schedule. Wong Luffy always makes a big fuss. If others notice him, it would be the biggest insult to his skills. After getting used to his current abilities, Sumu leaped up. He had just lost his mind and actually started climbing step by step. I'm not an ordinary person anymore. I can jump very high. Although he couldn't jump up on the first try, Sumu managed to grab the hull and, on his second jump, managed to get to the side of the boat. Finally, we made it up. Sumu grabbed the side of the boat, swung his body upwards, and landed steadily on the Moby Dick. To be honest, the body that has been copied with the ability is indeed different. Its physical attributes are simply amazing. Sumu was positioned slightly to the back. Looking ahead, he saw a broad, sturdy figure standing at the bow of the ship. His back exuded an aura of majesty, and his powerful presence made Sumu feel a little breathless. This is the strongest man in the world today, Whitebeard. Sumu swallowed hard, mustered his courage, and slowly walked over. However, all of Sumu's movements were noticed by the white-bearded man who had his back to him. Under the powerful observation haki, nothing could hide, and Sumu's every move was keenly observed. Kid, what do you want by coming aboard this ship? The white-bearded man didn't even turn his head. He stood tall and spoke in a deep voice. As a man who had experienced countless battles, Whitebeard could naturally discern a person's hostility. Clearly, the aura emanating from Sumu made Whitebeard feel no threat whatsoever, so he naturally didn't take him seriously. Dad. Sumu wasn't too surprised to be discovered. Instead, he couldn't wait to call out to the white-bearded man. Call someone Dad first, and you can't go wrong. Dad. Upon hearing the call, Whitebeard glanced over in confusion, and frowned slightly after seeing Sumu's appearance and build. Kid, which pirate crew do you belong to? The white-bearded man asked, clearly indicating that Sumu was not on his main ship, and he knew everyone on the main ship. Furthermore, Sumu has no tattoos on his body, so he is likely a new recruit in his pirate crew. I'm not a pirate, Dad. Sumu shook his head and truthfully replied, neither am I a marine. He probably didn't know what pirate crews Whitebeard had under his command, and pretending to be one might offend Whitebeard. It would be better to tell the truth. If he had called him father, even the most incompetent white-bearded man wouldn't have attacked him. Being able to stay by Whitebeard's side guarantees my safety. After all, those who actively attacked Whitebeard have already been thrown out like trash. The Revolutionary Army, no, you don't seem like those people. The white-bearded man muttered something to himself and stopped looking at Sumu. He chuckled and said, Kid, this is a battlefield. I don't know how you got in here, but you'd better save your life. Sumu didn't care about anything else. He walked towards the white-bearded man and stared intently at his thighs. Let him rub against me, just a little bit. Old man bye, I'm here to tell you some information. Information about Ace. When Sumu mentioned Ace, his tall, white-bearded body twitched slightly, and a glint of light flashed in his eyes. Sumu was overjoyed. It was obvious that Whitebeard cared a lot. Kid, what information do you have? Although Whitebeard somewhat looked down on Sumu, a hint of concern for the intelligence still lingered in his eyes. Of course. I'm a reporter for a global gossip organization. I have extensive intelligence. The white-bearded man remained silent, his gaze fixed intently on Sumu, who had come to his feet, exuding an aura that commanded respect. Feeling the white-bearded man's gaze, a silent sense of oppression crept into Sumu's heart. This man is terrifying at first glance. The World Gossip Organization is neither affiliated with the Navy nor with pirates. It attracts global attention by publishing embarrassing stories and news about the Navy and pirates. We are quite secretive, and nobody knows about us. Sumu started making things up. Boom. Whitebeard's face darkened, and he lightly tapped the ground with his Naginata, instantly unleashing an absolute aura upon Sumu. Sumu's legs went weak, and he almost knelt down. What intelligence? About Ace. The white-bearded man said coldly, not wanting Sumu to be too verbose. The Navy plans to execute Ace ahead of schedule. Whitebeard's expression changed upon hearing this, but he quickly regained his composure and glanced at Sumu. Kid, is the information true? It's absolutely true. Just as Sumu was about to continue chatting with Whitebeard and find an opportunity to rub against the man, a cold voice suddenly rang out behind Whitebeard. Sashivuri. Whitebeard, this is a battlefield, are you still chatting with this brat? Quicksand appeared behind Whitebeard, and a golden hook came toward his head. Sumu was shocked. They've arrived. Crocodile ambushed Whitebeard. He's here, so what's next? Boom. Suddenly, a loud bang was heard, and a dark figure flashed in front of the golden hook. Luffy, his body flushed red and steaming, kicked Crocodile's golden hook away, forcing him to retreat. Seeing the continuous killing blows overhead, Sumu's expression immediately changed, and he instantly squatted down. Damn it, Wong Luffy is here after all. Give him a little more time. Damn it, Straw Hat Boy, why are you protecting Whitebeard? Crocodile gritted his teeth, stepped aside, and glared at Luffy with displeasure. What? All I know is that Ace really likes this older man. Page 6. Luffy glared at Crocodile. Old Shaw didn't say much. Seeing that the sneak attack had failed, he reluctantly jumped off the boat. What? Sumu slowly raised his head, exhaled, turned to look at Luffy, and immediately swallowed. This is Luffy. That straw hat is definitely his trademark, and so are those slippers. He watched anime characters on TV every day, bought figurines of them, and even used them as wallpapers. Now, these anime characters were truly appearing before his eyes. Hey, uncle. Luffy immediately turned around and shouted something at Whitebeard. Facing the world's strongest man, Luffy's round eyes were pure and without the slightest fear. We all want to save Ace. I'll tell you something, the Navy wants to execute Ace ahead of schedule. Whitebeard didn't say much when he heard this information. He was initially skeptical when Sumu reported this information to him, but now that Luffy has said the same thing, he can almost believe that the news is true. He knew that the person in front of him was Ace's younger brother. This is also the arm that Shanks once gambled on in the new era. Hey kid, what are you doing? Do you even know who the enemy is? Your recklessness will get you killed. Whitebeard slammed his Naginata down hard once more. His words were full of rebuke and warning. Clearly, he was very unhappy with Luffy's behavior of bringing everyone down from the sky and shouting wildly. Oh shit. Sumu was knocked to the ground by the impact and couldn't help but cry out. Looking at Luffy, to everyone's surprise, Luffy was not affected at all. Instead, he frowned, bared his teeth, and shouted. Stop talking nonsense. This is none of your business. Upon hearing this, not only was Whitebeard stunned, but the pirates below the Moby Dick were also dumbfounded. But it's not over yet. I know you want to become the Pirate King, but the one who will become the Pirate King is me. Luffy's voice echoed throughout the battlefield, and even the battle cries could not drown it out. Ivankov and Buggy, who had come with Luffy, were both speechless, with cold sweat beading on their foreheads. This guy is confronting the world's strongest man face to face. What is he saying? Garp's eyes also darkened, and he covered his head, gritting his teeth in exasperation. His grandson was talking about these things again. As the pirates below were shocked, they also caught a glimpse of a small, thin figure sandwiched between Luffy and Whitebeard. Huh, who's that? Whitebeard, Straw Hat Boy, and one more is. No one knows who the person between Whitebeard and Luffy is, and neither Whitebeard nor Luffy knows either. Wow, Wong Luffy, your voice is really loud. Sumu unconsciously picked at his ear and struggled to his feet, unaware that, in the eyes of those below, he was on the same stage as Whitebeard and Luffy. In any case, it takes courage to stand with Whitebeard. Whitebeard and Luffy finally noticed Sumu between them again. Whitebeard didn't pay much attention to Sumu, but when he heard Luffy's shout, he only slightly curled the corner of his mouth. Is that so? I hope you don't hold me back, or I won't let you off the hook. Luffy, however, upon seeing Sumu, suddenly narrowed his eyes and tilted his head. Bowl cut. That's right, a few hours before Sumu transmigrated here, he got a haircut at the barbershop. Right after the haircut, his hairstyle really looked like a pot lid. Huh, what's a bowl cut? Sumu was taken aback. Luffy called him Bowl Cutter. Damn, this kid really likes giving people nicknames. My name isn't Pot Lid Head, it's Sumu. What? Bowl Cut. Hey, old man, I need to go save Ace. Luffy stopped paying attention to Sumu, took a deep breath, looked ahead, and prepared to run. Wong Luffy, wait a minute. Sumu quickly called out to Luffy. Whitebeard was not someone to be touched, but it would be better to touch Luffy. It wasn't that the white-bearded man was unapproachable, but Sumu dared not touch him. He was afraid that if he reached out, the man would send him flying. Back when Ace first joined the crew, he dreamed of fighting Whitebeard every day, but he was always mercilessly blasted away by the latter. This man isn't someone you can easily let anyone touch unless they take the initiative. That's why Sumu, like most people, didn't dare to touch him. Upon hearing this, Luffy stopped in his tracks and turned his head away unhappily. What are you doing, you bastard? As he spoke, Luffy suddenly puffed out his chest and gave Sumu a classic self-introduction. My name isn't Wong Luffy. I'm Riwamandi Luffy. I'm the man who will become the Pirate King. Oh, Wong Luffy hello. Chapter 4 copied Luffy's abilities. Oh, hello Wong Luffy Sumu stretched out his hand and smiled slightly. What does it mean to treat someone in the same way they treat you? We're just waiting for Luffy to get furious. Let him experience what it's like to have someone call him by the wrong name. Luffy was shocked, then muttered to himself, resting his chin on his hand. This guy, is he hard of hearing? You're so stupid. You can't even remember other people's names. Luffy laughed, swatted Sumu's hand away, and then couldn't help but step forward and pat Sumu's shoulder. It's okay, Bowl Cut, I'm off. What? Sumu was genuinely frightened by Luffy's idiotic attack. Indeed, you should never try to anger an idiot. Despite being speechless, Sumu felt a secret joy in his heart. That is, he just touched Luffy with his hand. That's right, Luffy slapped his hand, and he made contact with Luffy. Oh! Sumu shouted, watching Luffy jump off the ship, his eyes filled with uncontainable joy. Ding! God's hand successfully copied. Gain all of Monkey D. Luffy's abilities. Gum Gum Fruit, physical skills. Ding! Enhancement successful. Learn Observation Haki, learn Conqueror's Haki. A powerful force suddenly surged through Sumu's body, and a smile appeared on Sumu's lips. He had copied Luffy's ability. Furthermore, Sumu remembered that Luffy's Conqueror's Haki and Observation Haki were immature at this time. However, after being strengthened by the hand of God, he successfully learned both Observation Haki and Conqueror's Haki. In other words, he is now stronger than Luffy. This not only means that Sumu has the power of the Gum Gum Fruit, but also Luffy's physical attributes and all his techniques. The white-bearded man behind him seemed to sense the change in the skinny boy's demeanor, and his gaze towards Sumu changed. This kid. Things seem to have changed. Sumu slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, he felt that he had completed a transformation. Putting everything else aside, on this battlefield, as long as he doesn't provoke those generals or the like, preserving his life is no problem at all. But, Sumu looked at Luffy, who was already running on the battlefield, and then at Ace on the execution platform in the distance. At this moment, he had the ability to save his life, but for some reason, he felt as if there were some things he hadn't done. Page 7. The constant explosions of artillery fire around him pulled at his thoughts, while the howling wind whipped his hair. Scenes from the battlefield came into view, and one image after another flashed through my mind. Ace's body was pierced by the fiery fist, and Luffy, clutching the still-warm corpse, lost consciousness as his eyes went white. The remnants of the old era blasted open a huge rift, one end leading to the future, the other to the past. There was a time when he wondered what would have happened if Ace had called him Grandpa, what if Ace hadn't turned back, what if Luffy had been stronger. Will the outcome of this war be different? As a loyal One Piece fan, Sumu certainly didn't want Ace to die. It would be his regret. When he saw Luffy fall to the ground again and again on the battlefield and get up again and again, Sumu gritted his teeth and bent his body. Okay, he's made up his mind. Humph. What Akainu? What Marines? What Shishibukai? Nothing to fear. Ace is Luffy's older brother and a character beloved by many One Piece fans. Sumu even remembered that in his own world, that fiery punch generated 5 billion in box office revenue. This precisely proves what kind of status Ace holds in the hearts of One Piece fans. Luffy, wait for me, I'm coming to help you right away. I'll help you rescue your brother. Sumu said in a deep voice, now that we've transmigrated to the Marineford War, we can't just keep hiding forever. As a time traveler, I must make a difference here. Now that he has abilities even stronger than Luffy's, he is no longer afraid of losing his life. Besides, if you die, you die. Sumu's eyes darkened. Maybe if he died, he could travel back in time. But at least now, he wants to rescue Ace. To offer Luffy some help. Just as Sumu was about to take action, a majestic voice suddenly came from behind him. Hey, little devil. Sumu turned around and saw the white-bearded man looking at him with a sharp gaze. Although I don't know what your relationship with Ace is, I can tell that you also want to save him. As the white-bearded man spoke, a smile suddenly appeared on his lips. Watch out, don't die. Upon hearing this, Sumu was immediately filled with excitement. He looked at the white-bearded man, and this time, he no longer felt the fear he had before. Instead, he was filled with confidence. Of course. I must rescue Ace. Sumu seemed to be possessed by Luffy, shouting loudly, and his voice echoed throughout the entire battlefield. It reached Luffy's ears. Luffy dodged a soldier's blade, swept away a bunch of henchmen with a rubber whip, and looked at Sumu upon hearing the sound. That rascal. Is he Ace's friend? At this moment, Sumu had already taken action, rushing off the Moby Dick and into the battlefield. He's even more ferocious than Luffy. So what if I've never fought a war? So what if this is the first time I've fought this hard? You have to understand, he's a modern college student. He might feel a little out of place when he first transmigrates, but once he gets used to it, he'll start enjoying the thrill of being here. Sumu roared, rubber rubber. Pistol. His fist grew longer, instantly knocking away a charging Navy man. This unprecedented and incomparably powerful ability made Sumu's eyes gleam. Imagine a student who has lived a comfortable and normal life for 20 years, suddenly gaining Luffy's abilities. How could they not want to show off their skills? It's changed. It's gotten longer. It's really gotten longer. Sumu looked at his hands, noticing this strange sensation, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Once upon a time, he dreamed of having a rubber fruit that would allow his body to grow longer and thicker. It's done. Little sailors, come on. At this moment, Sumu was like a beast that had been suppressed for a long time. With a roar, he swept away a lot of henchmen in just a few breaths. This guy is really strong. Luffy noticed Sumu and suddenly laughed. He clasped his hands in a fist salute, his eyes filled with even more fighting spirit than before. Yoshi, I need to work harder too. Ace, wait for me. Immediately, the commotion caused by Luffy and Sumu attracted the attention of many Marines. The Navy immediately began to surround them. Sumu is stronger than Luffy and handles Marines below the rank of Vice Admiral with ease on the battlefield, so he has no intention of backing down. Despite his fighting spirit, Sumu gradually frowned as he faced the ever-increasing number of Navy personnel. Why are there so many people in the Navy? If this continues, he'll eventually run out of energy. It's worth noting that even Luffy, with his incredible stamina, only managed to last until the end because Ivankov injected him with stimulants. He doesn't have Ivankov, nor is he willing to waste his life on performance-enhancing drugs. At this rate, he probably won't even make it to the execution platform. But he quickly calmed down. In terms of combat experience, he is indeed inferior to Luffy. He has the ability, but lacks combat experience. Looking back on Luffy's journey, it seems, Luffy avoids unnecessary battles and rushes straight to the execution platform. Thinking of this, a glint of light flashed in Sumu's eyes. He understood. These scumbags can't catch him, he just needs to keep charging forward to conserve his energy. If you encounter a tough opponent that you can't avoid, then do your best to defeat them quickly. In just a few breaths, Sumu jumped over many Marines and rushed to a short distance behind Luffy. At this moment, Luffy swept away the enemies surging from all directions and focused intently on dealing with the giant Marine in front of him. Its massive body solidly blocked Luffy's path. Luffy jumped up, yelling as he was about to attack a Marine giant. Suddenly another giant appeared and swung his iron bar, knocking the giant to the ground. Boom. Hateful. Luffy crashed heavily onto the ice, stood up, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and stared at the two giants with a furrowed brow and gritted teeth. Without hesitation, he immediately bit his thumb. Enter, third gear, bone balloon. To defeat a giant of this size, you need to go into gear third to quickly end the battle. Sumu, who was a few steps away from Luffy, saw Luffy's fist suddenly swell up, its size instantly approaching that of the enormous giant. Without hesitation, Luffy leaped into the air, threw a giant punch, and roared. Rubber rubber, the giant's spear. The enormous fist immediately knocked one of the naval giants to the ground. The terrifying force instantly shattered his teeth and caused him to lose consciousness. But the other marine giant wasn't going to just stand by and watch. Taking advantage of Luffy's punch, he swung his iron bar and smashed it down on Luffy again. Luffy gritted his teeth, staring at the iron bar so close to his face, with no way to dodge it. Just as he was about to take the blow head-on, a huge roar came at the same time. Rubber rubber. Giant spear. Sumu had somehow appeared in front of the giant wielding the club, and his right fist, just like Luffy's, had transformed into a giant fist. Boom. Sumu swung his giant fist with all his might and slammed it hard into the face of the naval giant. Page 8. The immense force struck, immediately causing him to lose his balance, his eyes rolled back, and he crashed heavily to the ground. Luffy only had enough time to dodge the giant iron rod that was about to smash into him because Sumu's heavy punch knocked down the giant attacking him. Sumu let out a breath and looked at his fist with surprise. It worked. It actually worked. That's some serious mouth-blowing skill. I used to find it amazing that Luffy could blow his fist so big, and I thought it was unrealistic. But now, he's actually blowing up his fist just like Luffy. This feeling of power. It's so exhilarating. Looking at the naval giant who had taken the hit and was now unconscious, Sumu felt an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. Thanks, bowl cut. Luffy thanked Sumu, but was slightly taken aback when he saw Sumu's giant fist, which was just as big as his own. Then, incredulously, he opened his mouth wide and shouted, "Huh, your fist can grow that big? Like the one from Sri Lanka." The two landed on the ground one after the other, and the energy in the giant fist instantly dissipated. You should know that the third gear has a side effect, turning you into a child. To Sumu's surprise, it was understandable that he hadn't shrunk, since he had been strengthened, but Luffy hadn't shrunk either. When did Luffy overcome this side effect? Sumu and Luffy exchanged a glance. Luffy stared blankly at Sumu for a moment, then grinned, revealing 2 rows of large teeth. Bowl cut, you're really something. Wong Luffy, I'll go with you to save Ace. Yoshi, Ijisu. Without another word, Luffy immediately continued charging towards the execution platform. This was a battlefield, and although Luffy might seem a bit slow, he actually possessed a very high level of intelligence when it came to combat. He knew very well that he was surrounded by enemies and could not relax for a moment. Sumu quickly followed behind. Now that he had been enhanced and possessed observation haki, he was even more aware of the enemy's movements than Luffy. I just hope that those admirals and Shishibukai won't stop them, otherwise it will be a tough battle. At this moment, Ivankov and Jinbe, who were not far from Luffy, were both dumbfounded when they saw Sumu behind Luffy. Who's that behind Straw Hat Boy? Is he from the Whitebeard pirates? Why don't I recognize him? Ivankov blinked his long eyelashes and looked at Sumu's back with a puzzled expression. If Sumu were a member of the Whitebeard pirates, he would theoretically be a division commander with similar strength to Luffy. In that case, he should know him. Or perhaps the captain of a pirate crew under Whitebeard? No, someone like that would definitely be quite famous in the world. What? Isn't he a revolutionary? Ivankov. Upon hearing Ivankov's question, Jinbe immediately frowned and asked in return. He had never met Sumu before and originally thought Sumu was in the Revolutionary Army, since he had never seen Sumu in the Whitebeard pirates. But now that Ivankov had said that, he began to feel confused. This guy isn't a member of the Revolutionary Army, not part of the Whitebeard pirates, and not even a fellow prisoner from his previous life, yet he's still beating up the Marines and saving Ace. Who is he? Ace's friend? How did he get in? For now, Jinbe and Ivankov can only assume that Sumu was a friend Ace made during his adventures. Ace. Luffy's loud shout pulled the two back to their thoughts. With a look of great satisfaction, Sumu and Luffy charged towards the execution platform from the left and right. Luffy stayed to the left, Sumu to the right, and all the Marines blocking their way were blasted away by the rubber machine gun. Oh! Luffy was astonished when he saw that Sumu's arm could extend as long as his. Same ability as me. But Luffy, being so single-minded, didn't think much of it and simply assumed that Sumu was someone who had eaten a devil fruit similar to his own. After all, with Luffy's intelligence, he would never have imagined that Sumu was using his ability. Sumu stared ahead, his brows furrowed despite having knocked away quite a few Marines. These are just minor characters now. Later on, the powerful Shishibukai and Vice Admirals will make their move. Sumu swallowed hard. The moment the thought crossed his mind, a dangerous aura appeared beside him. Several plumes of smoke instantly enveloped the two of them. Chapter 5 The Empress's Fragrant Feet. Smoke. Sumu frowned, not yet realizing what the smoke was. But Luffy's expression changed drastically, as if he had encountered a formidable enemy, and he nimbly dodged several attacks from the smoke. The smoke transformed into several sharp, long streaks, swirling around the two of them. Although Sumu was standing with Luffy, the smoke didn't seem to be aimed at him. Instead, it all went towards Luffy. Sumu looked in Luffy's direction, and in the blink of an eye, a blue-haired figure with a cigar in his mouth appeared amidst the smoke. Smorg. Sumu instantly recognized the person in front of him as Smoker from the Navy. So it was you, old Deng. Sumu's eyes darkened, and his expression turned slightly unpleasant. Smoker is a user of the smoke fruit, a Logia-type devil fruit. Neither he nor Luffy possesses armament haki, so they can't hurt him at all, meaning he can only take the beating. This is why Smoker, despite being attacked by everyone in the world, was able to beat up the future Pirate King. It's fair to say that Smoker can't beat anyone except Luffy. Rubber. Machine gun. As the future Pirate King, Luffy has no reason to be at the mercy of others. He dodged the attack, defiantly leaping into the air and wildly swinging his fists while suspended in midair. Upon seeing this, Sumu slapped his forehead. "Wang Luffy, you've forgotten that hitting him is useless." Sure enough, Smoker floated in the air, symbolically dodging Luffy's attacks, and with incredible agility, Luffy's fist passed right through his body. Then, his lower body acted like a propulsion unit, transforming into smoke that propelled him straight toward Luffy. While Luffy was in the air and unable to dodge, Smoker raised his weapon and swiftly pressed his 10-handed weapon against Luffy's throat. Familiar moves, familiar captures. The two landed directly from the sky, while Luffy was slammed onto the ice and unable to move. Sumu was not surprised at all by this scene. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Smoker was Luffy's nemesis. "Damn it, I can't even hurt him, and I don't know how to use armament haki." Sumu gritted his teeth. Although he had copied Luffy's abilities, Luffy didn't know any armament haki at all, so no matter how much he strengthened himself, it would be useless. Without armament haki, Smoker wouldn't even be able to touch a hair on his head. Seeing Luffy pinned down, Sumu, having no other choice, decided to try anything and kicked Smoker. As expected, lacking armament haki, he kicked Smoker's neck, turning it into a cloud of smoke. But this inadvertently reduced the force in Smoker's hand, giving Luffy a chance to catch his breath. It works. Sumu keenly noticed that Smoker's weapon, which was pressed against Luffy's throat, shifted slightly due to his attack. "Continue. Wang Luffy, stand up. Aren't you going to save Ace?" Sumu gritted his teeth and roared, then lashed out at Smoker with another rubber whip, turning Smoker's body into a cloud of smoke once again. Upon hearing this, Luffy's eyes suddenly sharpened, and a surge of power welled up within him. Page 9. Taking advantage of the weakened power of Smoker's hand as he turned into smoke, Luffy pushed himself up and kicked the smoke, instantly breaking free from his restraints. He almost died. Bowl cut, thank you. Luffy stuck out his tongue and coughed twice, then a sly, idiotic look immediately appeared in his eyes. If he can't beat them, can't he at least run away? So Luffy immediately ran to one side with Sumu. Sumu remembered that Smoker didn't know observation haki yet, so if he went into a crowd, he wouldn't be able to find anything. However, Smoker on the other side wouldn't let the two escape his sight. Before Luffy could get away, he took the lead, turning into smoke and arriving back beside Luffy. Sumu's expression also turned grim. It wasn't because of anything else, but because this time Smoker's attack was not only aimed at Luffy, but also at him. Smoke had silently gathered around him, as if trying to bind him up. It seems that his act of saving Luffy just now attracted Smoker's attention. This is so damn annoying. Feeling the hazy and pungent smoke, Sumu couldn't help but cough, cursing loudly while his brows furrowed. "Right now, the smoke from the chain smoker is blocking my way. What should I do?" Just as Sumu was looking grim and at a loss, a sweet fragrance wafted towards him. The pungent smoke was dispersed by the fragrant breeze. At that moment, the air seemed to be filled with a sweet fragrance, as if pink bubbles were rising from it. Sumu couldn't help but become deeply involved. "Big fragrant feet." Suddenly, a soft female voice rang out, pulling Sumu back to reality. A woman dressed in purple, resembling a high-slit Cheongsam, with an extremely graceful and sexy figure, kicked Smoker away. Sumu came to his senses and saw that the smoke in front of him had disappeared. He was immediately overjoyed and glanced at his helpers. "It smells so good. This is..." She wore snake-shaped earrings, and her long, straight black hair cascaded down her back, exuding an aura of majesty and unapproachability befitting a queen. Boa Hancock. Sumu's pupils contracted. This is the Empress. When Sumu caught a glimpse of Hancock's face, he clearly felt his heart skip a beat at her beauty. "Holy crap. It's so beautiful. I knew the Empress was beautiful, but I didn't know she was this beautiful." In a two-dimensional world, it may be difficult to discern beauty, but now that the two-dimensional world has been transformed into 3 dimensions, Sumu can see that the woman's beauty has only increased. Even her face seemed to be shrouded in a hazy, captivating aura that was impossible to resist. Sumu was stunned, unsure whether it was the allure of Hancock's sweet fruit or his natural male instincts, as drool began to flow. He could understand why those sailors looked at Hancock with hearts in their eyes. It's perfectly normal for a young, energetic college student like him to be somewhat stunned by her beauty. He only snapped out of his daze after the Empress uttered an angry word. "Smoker, put your weapon away. How dare they treat my beloved like this? It's truly unforgivable." The Empress's imposing aura pressed down upon them. Although Sumu now possessed Luffy's abilities, upon sensing that aura, he still felt an urge to obey the Empress's every command. Is this the power of the love fruit? Those marine soldiers were all controlled by Hancock, let alone the mind of an ordinary person like him. Furthermore, even the air around the Empress smells sweet. Those feet must smell sweet. Otherwise, why would they be called Big Fragrant Feet? Boa Hancock, why are you helping Straw Hat Luffy? You're a Shishibukai. As expected, even the 7 warlords of the sea can't be trusted. Smoker, supporting himself on the ground, spoke with some anger. The Empress's kick still throbbed with pain. Huh, is it any of your business what I do? The Empress's face darkened, her voice grew gruff, and she glared at Smoker with displeasure. I can do whatever I want. Smoker, how dare you address me by my first name? Hancock. As soon as the Empress finished speaking, Luffy, who had been rescued again, suddenly grinned and called out. Yes, you called me by my name again, Luffy. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this voice, Hancock immediately lost all her queenly composure. 2 blushes instantly appeared on her face, which was covered in black lines. She turned her head and glanced at Luffy in a coquettish manner, her eyes filled with stars. Sumu was dumbfounded. Although I know the Empress is a hopeless romantic, but he didn't expect this to be so outrageous. I used to think that the face-changing effect in anime was just an animation effect, but now that it looks like it in reality. This face changes faster than an anime character. You can't even see any transitions between expressions by staring at each frame. Luffy, this is the key to the handcuffs that will save your brother. Hancock handed the handcuff key to Luffy with a shy expression. Upon seeing this, Luffy was immediately overjoyed, revealing his teeth in a broad smile. Sumu also looked at the key and nodded slightly. With the key, Ace could be saved as long as they reached the execution platform. Ah, Hancock, thank you. Luffy laughed and leaped up, hugging the Empress's upper body and wrapping his legs around her waist, overjoyed. For him, Hancock bringing him into Impel Down, bringing him to the Marineford War, and now giving him the key to Ace's handcuffs was a huge help. Luffy. The Empress let out a soft gasp as she saw Luffy hugging her. Deep down, she had already decided what to name her child with Luffy. The Empress's sweet voice subtly touched Sumu's heart. The power of the love fruit is truly amazing. Just hearing it is enough to petrify someone, without even the Empress needing to activate her skills. Having gotten the key, Luffy let go and excitedly shouted to Sumu, let's go. Bowl cut. But Sumu remained unmoved. Seeing Luffy get off the Empress, Sumu was still staring at her intently. What was going on? Did he actually want to hug her too? But copying the Empress's abilities seems pretty good too. Hancock, thank you so much. Sumu also laughed and jumped up, mimicking Luffy's happy expression as he hugged the Empress. He wasn't tempted by the sweet fruit, he simply wanted to copy it. At this moment, the latter is immersed in joy and will definitely not pay much attention to me. It should be okay to hug him while I'm at it. Once he gets a hug, he can use God's hand to copy it. Little did anyone know, Hancock, who was immersed in happiness and bliss, had a keen eye on Sumu. Her expression suddenly changed, a hint of disdain and ruthlessness flashing in her eyes. What? Who do you think you are, daring to address me by my given name? Big Fragrant Feet. Before Sumu could even hug her, the Empress kicked him, sending him flying far away. Puff. Sumu immediately coughed up blood, his eyes trembling. Damn it, I was too hasty. He copied Luffy's abilities, but at least Luffy knows Haki. Page 10. That kick was delivered without hesitation. Ouch. This woman doesn't like anyone except Luffy. Sumu's skull was gradually turning to stone, and he was on the verge of losing consciousness. We're doomed. We've really messed up. Sumu thought to himself, no, with my current abilities, which are also Luffy's current strength, I definitely can't go up against Hancock. Even with Luffy's gum fruit powers, that powerful kick to the head still caused Sumu considerable injury. Furthermore, since he doesn't become petrified like Luffy, who is immune to women, the attacks he receives will definitely be much more severe. This Empress, she'll fight anyone. I should have known better than to be so reckless. I was such an idiot. Sumu, on the verge of losing consciousness from petrification, desperately cursed himself. But the Empress's fragrant feet really did smell fragrant, and the skin she had secretly touched with lightning speed was indeed incredibly smooth. Sumu smiled. Empress, oh Empress, you truly deserve to be one of the most beautiful women in One Piece. If he had met her a few months earlier, he would have been able to completely win her over with his personal charm. Unfortunately, the Empress already has someone in her heart, so Sumu has lost interest. Suddenly, a voice rang in Sumu's mind. Holy crap. I thought you were going to be a new generation of heroes among transmigrators, but you actually secretly touched someone's leg. Huh, what's it to you? How can I copy without touching your leg? Alright, then I'll tell you about today's task of locking abilities. Upon completion of the mission, the host will be able to add the Hand of God to the ability pool. If the host draws an ability that he is not satisfied with, he can choose any ability from the ability pool. The mission is to kiss Ivankov. What? Sumu was immediately horrified. The image of Ivankov's sausage-like lips flashed through his mind, and 1,000 grass-like horses ran through his heart. He would rather not have this ability. But before Sumu could think any further, petrification gradually filled his entire head, and he gradually lost consciousness. But just before losing consciousness, a clear warning sound rang out. Ding! God's hand successfully copied. Gained and enhanced all of Boa Hancock's abilities. Love Fruit Power. Learn Armament Haki, Conqueror's Haki, and Observation Haki. At this moment, Hancock, who hadn't paid attention to whether Sumu was good or bad, only felt that this person seemed to be stealing her body, so she kicked him hard. Bowl cut. Luffy, who was running, turned around when he heard the noise and saw Sumu being kicked away, his head already turned into a stone. Hey! Luffy's eyes bulged out, and he couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Hancock. That guy is Ace's friend. Quickly restore that stone to its original state. Upon hearing Luffy's voice, Hancock's fierce gaze immediately softened. But after hearing what was said, a look of self-reproach and panic suddenly appeared in his eyes. She instinctively covered her head. What? That's Luffy's friend. He'll definitely come to my wedding with Luffy. Just in case he gets Luffy's brother to object to us being together. It's over. While inwardly panicking, the Empress also tried to remove Sumu's petrified state. But as soon as she glanced over, she discovered that there was not a trace of petrification on Sumu's entire body. Seeing this, the Empress frowned. She remembered that Sumu had been petrified by her. Without her, it would have been impossible to break the petrification, yet Sumu managed to break it himself. Could it be that he, like Luffy before him, is immune to her charms and won't be petrified? No, Sumu should have been petrified by that kick just now, so logically he shouldn't have been able to undo it. Hancock looked at Sumu with a hint of surprise in her eyes. This man seemed a little unusual. She hadn't noticed it before, but now, after examining Sumu again, Hancock realized that his aura was steady and his strength was definitely not weak. Ouch. Sumu was lying straight on the ice, rubbing his face, then slowly stood up and let out a cry of pain. Fortunately, the rubber fruit has a thick skin, and God hand-copied the Empress's abilities and enhanced them, allowing her to break free from petrification on her own. Otherwise, she would have become a stone on the top. Also, the Empress's power, the love fruit. Sumu looked at his palm. Did that mean he also had that alluring aura? Thinking of this, Sumu got goosebumps all over his body and immediately shook his head. No way. How could a virile young man like him straighten up, put away his penis, and do such a seductive thing? Sumu would never use this ability even once. However, the forced petrification technique could be used, and he also stole and learned the Empress's 3 types of haki. Now, he truly felt emboldened. After all, with the Empress and Luffy combined, surviving on the summit would be more than a piece of cake. Hey, bowl cut, you're alright. Let's go. Seeing that Sumu had returned to normal, Luffy immediately stopped arguing and continued running forward. Seeing this, Sumu glanced back at the Empress before following her. Meanwhile, the Empress watched Sumu's retreating figure, her brows furrowed slightly, and she muttered to herself, Luffy's friend. Luffy, don't let him fool you. Chapter 6 Luffy's Protective Shield. At this moment, Luffy and Sumu started running one after the other again. In this chaotic Marineford war, the two have become the main characters. With their eye-catching moves and loud voices, and given that Sumu and Luffy are not too far apart in height, the two seem like a duo that has been together for many years. Perfect teamwork, identical moves, and formidable strength. The two of them took down many naval soldiers along the way, which immediately turned Sengoku's face ashen on the execution platform. He stared intently at Luffy, gritted his teeth, glanced at Sumu behind him, and said in a deep voice, Forget about Straw Hat Boy. Where did that brat come from? Is he with the Whitebeard pirates? Or the Revolutionary Army? I haven't seen him on any wanted posters. Garp, is that brat your grandson too? Sengoku suddenly turned his head and yelled at Garp, who was sitting next to Ace. You know, there's not a single one of them who's easy to deal with. What? A grandson? I don't know that kid. Garp glanced at Sumu next to Luffy and immediately denied it. He would never raise 3 grandsons like that. Upon hearing this, Jean-Gua frowned deeply. Sumu's appearance made it impossible for him to connect any information about him. As the current fleet admiral of the Warring States period, he was well informed about all the latest news and had a general understanding of all the famous and powerful pirates. He was observant and attentive to all sides. But Sumu, he didn't know who this kid was at all. With such capabilities, there's no reason not to recognize them. Stop Straw Hat Boy and that brat next to him. Stop them. Sengoku's voice was extremely authoritative as he spoke into the microphone to all the naval admirals. Upon hearing this, the Marines immediately focused their attacks on Sumu and Luffy. Sumu glanced at the surrounding navy, his eyes showing no emotion whatsoever. These things are not enough for him at this moment. Page 11. But just as the two were locked in combat with the navy, a dangerous aura suddenly approached. An extreme threat suddenly came from behind them. Sumu, who possesses observation haki, immediately noticed and turned around to look after her expression changed slightly. That was an extremely sharp slash. Fuck. Sumu couldn't help but utter the quintessence of Chinese culture, and hurriedly dodged, the slash grazing past his heel. After landing, Sumu hurriedly looked in Luffy's direction, where a figure wearing a black cloak and holding a large black sword appeared. That's Hawkeye, the world's greatest swordsman. As one of the 7 warlords of the sea, Hawkeye had no choice but to intervene when he saw Luffy and Sumu charging forward with unwavering determination. But when he actually makes a move, it's just a simple basic attack. Sumu gasped. With his current abilities, he was simply no match for Hawkeye. Even though he just copied the Empress's abilities, given his manly nature, he certainly wouldn't be able to fully utilize the power of the Love fruit. Even if she used all her abilities, the Empress at this stage still couldn't beat Hawkeye. Luffy can't do that either, all they can do is run. Hateful. Luffy placed his hands on his knees, activated Gear Second, and his entire body turned bright red. Luffy had no intention of fighting Mihawk. Although he wasn't afraid of Mihawk, he knew that this guy with the knife was very strong. He can't waste time with him here. Hawkeye then unleashed another slash at the two men. Both Sumu and Luffy's eyes darkened. If they were hit by that blow, they would definitely be dismembered. Although Hawkeye's attack is a basic attack, its damage should not be underestimated. Sumu also quickly activated Gear Second. Unlike Luffy's charging time, Sumu, after being strengthened, had already reached the point where he could quickly activate Gear Second. Both of them dodged the attack, then tacitly abandoned Hawkeye, stopped fighting, and plunged into the crowd, continuing to run towards the execution platform. Sumu and Luffy exchanged a glance, and sure enough, neither of them wanted to fight Hawkeye. To be honest, Sumu was worried that Luffy might lose his temper and want to fight Hawkeye to the death, but it seems that he underestimated Luffy's battle intelligence. At this moment, their only goal is to reach the execution platform as quickly as possible, rescue Ace, and then make their escape. But Hawkeye clearly had no intention of letting the two go. He stared ahead and quickly spotted the two people in the chaotic crowd. With a blank expression, he unleashed another basic attack, cracking the ice surface where it struck. The attack was incredibly fierce, as if he intended to kill two birds with one stone, slicing Luffy and Sumu in two. Sumu felt that terrifying aura again and hurriedly dodged, narrowly escaping once more. But Luffy didn't have such a good ending. His observation haki was not mature enough, and although he barely dodged the fatal wound, he was still hit in the end. His body was immediately thrown into the city wall. Wang Luffy. Seeing Luffy being knocked away, Sumu couldn't help but shout, his heart filled with worry. After all, Hawkeye's slash was quite powerful. But when another slash came toward him, Sumu couldn't care less about Luffy and was also sent flying while trying to dodge. Noticing a slight pain in his thigh, Sumu instantly snapped out of his daze. Wait a minute, who was he worried about just now? Luffy? Is he worried about Luffy? Is he worried that Luffy will die? Luffy is the main character of this series. Not only is he thick-skinned, but he also has a built-in buff that prevents him from missing attacks. Even if Luffy were chopped into noodles, he probably wouldn't die. What right does he have to worry about Luffy? He should worry about his own life first. You Hawkeye, you're so nice to Perona, yet you're using a small cleaver to chop on a cutting board and cook for her. He didn't hold back when it came to the two of us handsome guys. Sumu struggled to get down from the city wall, glancing at Eagle Eye with disdain. This guy is also a lolicon. You better not mess with me, or I'll put on a Lolita outfit and use my love fruit powers to petrify you. But no sooner had he finished speaking than Hawkeye, like a persistent leech, came after Luffy and Sumu once again. Upon seeing this, Sumu reacted as if he had seen a plague god, and he and Luffy simultaneously rolled away to dodge the attack. Looking at Wang Luffy beside him, Sumu suddenly had an idea. This guy is the main character, he won't die. He's so tough, maybe we can use him as a shield. Just as Sumu was making his thoughts, Hawkeye unleashed another slash. The two quickly lowered their heads, and a sharp black sword aura swept across their hair and pierced the sky. Looking back, the frozen giant wave was immediately cut in two. A tremendous roar swept across the battlefield. The sheer power of this attack immediately drew the attention of the entire battlefield. Sumu stared at the severed giant wave, his eyes nearly popping out of their sockets in shock. That power, it's incredible. You can't see it on TV, but once you experience it in person, Sumu realized just how terrifying Eagle Eye is. No, he has to think of a solution. As Sumu pondered, he looked at Luffy, his gaze darkening, a strange light appearing in his eyes. Inspiration suddenly flooded my mind. Wang Luffy, I have a perfect plan that can help us evade Hawkeye's pursuit. Sumu's gaze darkened, and he spoke with a deliberately serious expression. What method? Upon hearing this, Luffy turned his head and looked at Sumu with a question mark on his face. That is, turtle fusion technique. I'll hide behind you, pretending to be a tortoise shell and merge with you. At that time, Hawkeye's attack will be nothing. And we'll be able to escape this kid's pursuit very soon. Sumu started to bluff, leaving Luffy completely bewildered. Huh, really? Sure enough, Luffy's eyes lit up as soon as he heard the word fusion, and he looked incredibly eager. Then what are we waiting for, bowl cut? Let's get started. It is good. Rubber. Protective shield. Sumu roared and then leaped onto Luffy's back, grabbing him with both hands and feet. With her legs wrapped around Luffy's waist and her hands reaching out from under Luffy's armpits to wrap around his chest, she completely hugged Luffy and hung on him. In this way, they kept Luffy occupied without rendering him immobile. It really does look like a tortoise shell hanging on Luffy's back. Humph, you little brat. Sumu snorted twice, then poked his head out from behind Eagle Eye, his eyes full of provocation and disdain. Humph, I'm now tied to Wang Luffy. If I can't beat you, can't I at least run away? You think you can mess with me? Luffy has the protagonist's halo, so he definitely won't die. Since that's the case, he and Luffy should stick together and die together. If Luffy doesn't die, he won't die either. Who can kill him? Luffy's protective shield truly lives up to its name. I'm fucking a genius. Sumu couldn't help but sigh. Combination complete. Yo sure. Let's go. Page 12. Luffy sensed the fusion with Sumu, and his morale soared. He roared. For him, what he carried on his back was not Sumu, but a symbol of the man's handsomeness after the fusion. That's a man's romance. Furthermore, given Sumu's weight and the way he was wrapped around Luffy, he couldn't possibly have any effect on Luffy's strength. Yes, it's just spiritual encouragement. Charge. Luffy. Riding Luffy, Sumu roared and charged forward. Hawkeye was slightly taken aback by what the two were doing. What kind of maneuver was this? Look, Luffy, look at this silly bird, he's completely bewildered by our shaking. Pot-lid hair. Charge. Full of passion, Luffy charged straight at Hawkeye, closing in and no longer trying to dodge. Hawkeye saw Luffy charging towards him and no longer held back, raising his black blade to strike again. At that moment, Luffy inadvertently looked up and happened to catch a glimpse of Buggy, who had been swept into the sky by Crocodile Sandstorm. Without hesitation, Luffy stretched out his arm and pulled. Rubber. Scapegoat. With a roar from Luffy, Buggy was pulled down and shielded in front of him. Mihawk cut Buggy in two. When Sumu saw Buggy from behind, he was shocked. Luffy, who seemed stupid, wasn't so stupid after all. First, he used Luffy as a shield, and now Luffy is using Buggy as a scapegoat. Rubber. Jet. Scapegoat. But it wasn't over yet. Luffy shouted again and threw Buggy at Mihawk like a weapon. Buggy's shrill, panicked voice immediately rang out. As expected, Hawkeye calmly and skillfully chopped Buggy's body into several pieces about the thickness of noodles. Upon seeing this scene, Sumu's eyes widened. The anime couldn't depict the gore at the top, but the reality was quite different. At that moment, Sumu saw the dismembered Baki, the broken organs, and the floating blood, and a sense of unease immediately arose in his heart. He comes from the normal world, he's never seen anything like this before. Fortunately, Buggy is a user of the chop fruit, which makes him immune to the damage from the slashes, and his body instantly recovers. Sumu swallowed hard and retreated back behind Luffy. Buggy, enraged, pressed his face against Luffy's and began to hurl insults. Sumu huddled behind Luffy, ignoring Buggy's rant. To deal with Buggy, it takes Luffy and Shanks, no one else will do the job. As expected, Luffy's ambiguous and irrelevant answers left Buggy speechless with frustration. But Hawkeye, who was standing to the side, had no time to watch the argument and unleashed another slash. Even a basic attack is still terrifying. Buggy was immediately sent flying and disappeared from sight, while Luffy continued to dodge with Sumu on his back, and Mihawk's pursuit began again. Sumu felt Luffy's passion beneath him and couldn't help but give him an approving look. Luffy was one of the easiest people to fool these days. In that case, he would certainly be out of danger. With his arms wrapped around Luffy's waist and around Luffy's chest, Sumu had a very strange feeling. Fighting alongside the future Pirate King and getting up close and personal with him has a unique charm. Luffy, kill. Luffy, kill. Sumu released one hand, and his mount, the future Pirate King, roared and pointed forward. At this moment, even with the world's greatest swordsman, Hawkeye, in pursuit, he was fearless. Sumu suddenly remembered that at this moment, a powerful figure would appear to help Luffy stop Mihawk's pursuit. Sure enough, Sumu heard Little Ma suddenly shout from not far away. Baista. Immediately, a man with a small mustache and wearing a tall hat appeared, wielding two long swords, and clashed with Hawkeye's black sword with a loud bang. The 5th Division commander of the Whitebeard pirates. Baista. Sumu looked back and saw that Vista had already stopped Hawkeye, preventing him from pursuing. He breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Luffy's connections were still solid. If it weren't for the fact that the Whitebeard pirates knew he was Ace's brother, they wouldn't have bothered with him. At that moment, Luffy also turned around and saw that Hawkeye had indeed not chased after them, just as Sumu had said, and immediately laughed. Ah, bowl cut, your trick really worked. That guy's off fighting someone else. Of course. Would I lie to you? Sumu remained close to Luffy, casually continuing his bluff, before glancing up at Sengoku on the execution platform. For some reason, as my abilities improved, my eyesight also got better. He could clearly see the expression on Sengoku's face, as if he had just eaten something disgusting. The Marine Admiral looked down at Luffy and Sumu, his eyes filled with hostility. Luffy was so engrossed in the battle that he didn't notice Sengoku's gaze, but Sumu, who was temporarily in a state of inactivity, looked up and met his eyes directly. The two men locked eyes, separated by half the battlefield. Zhanguo's eyes were filled with concern for Sumu and a desire to suppress him. Even without moving, he still exuded the air of a commander. Sumu kept his eyes straight ahead. If it had been 10 minutes ago, he probably wouldn't have dared to make eye contact with this naval admiral for even a second. But now, possessing abilities surpassing those of ordinary Shishibukai, he is not afraid of Sengoku at all. This confidence comes from strength. Instead of panicking, Sumu smiled slightly. He was now completely immersed in the Marineford War, and the panic and unease he had when he first arrived here were nowhere to be seen. Upon seeing Sumu's smile, Zhangguo was initially surprised, but then his gaze darkened. "Kid, you'd better not come near me." Chapter 7 One Punch sends Lieutenant General Jaender flying. However, Sumu could tell that although Sengoku glanced at him, he didn't really pay much attention to him and Luffy. At this moment, during the Warring States period, he had to pay close attention to the battlefield at all times. As the strategist who commanded the army, he had even more important things to consider. Sumu saw Zhangguo pick up a microphone, slightly open his mouth, and say something. But Sumu vaguely sensed a sense of unease. What was Sengoku planning to do at this time? Sumu patted his head, trying hard to recall. He had watched the top a long time ago and couldn't quite remember the script, only the more classic scenes. But suddenly a thought flashed through his mind, and Sumu finally remembered. The news of Ace's premature execution, which was leaked before the Warring States period, seems to have been deliberately leaked. The purpose was to make the Whitebeard pirates aggressive upon hearing this news and rush into the bay. Thus, the pacifists entered from the rear, flanking Whitebeard's crew and creating an encirclement. Sumu swallowed hard and scanned the positions of the Whitebeard pirates on the battlefield. Seeing that they were standing in scattered positions, Sumu breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Whitebeard did not pass the news on to his subordinates. It seems that he had seen through his old rival Sengoku's scheme long ago. Aside from the idiot beneath him, he kept pushing forward aggressively, as if afraid Ace would be executed prematurely. As soon as Sumu finished thinking, he saw a group of dark figures walking out from behind the battlefield. An explosion was followed by beams of yellow laser light. The beam of light flashed into the battlefield with terrifying force, and its powerful impact immediately sank several pirate ships. As the group of dark figures emerged from the smoke of the explosion, war machines resembling tyrant bears appeared one after another. Sumu was not too familiar with these machines. Back in the Sabayati archipelago, it took Luffy and his crew a lot of effort and exhaustion to break just one machine. Sumu glanced at the number of pacifists and gritted his teeth. Page 13. Such formidable fighting power, once deployed in battle, will cause immense trouble for the Whitebeard pirates. Sengoku naturally realized that his plan had failed, but he no longer cared and immediately ordered all the pacifists to charge the pirates from both the front and rear. Upon hearing this, the pacifists sprang into action, moving at incredible speed, unleashing countless laser beams that swept across the entire battlefield. As Sumu helped Luffy dodge beams of laser light, the shockwaves from the explosions caused Luffy to fall to the ground repeatedly. After a flash of light, Sumu looked towards the outer bay and saw many pirates lying dead. The scene was practically hell on earth. Screams, shouts, and sobs drifted on the wind above the battlefield and then reached Sumu's ears. At this moment, Sumu also realized that after awakening his observation haki, his hearing seemed to have been enhanced as well. As he listened to these sounds, a subtle change occurred within him. This is the battlefield. Cruel, ruthless, and filled with constant killing, life seems to slip away faster than time itself, like grass. He seemed to understand what kind of mindset that coward, Kobe, had when he tried to stop Akainu from continuing his slaughter. He and Kobe were very similar. It seemed they were both seeing this kind of scene for the first time. Sumu was stunned until Luffy knocked him to the ground and brought him back to his senses. Damn it! My legs are starting to give way. Luffy knelt down on one knee, supporting himself with one hand on the ground, panting heavily, with beads of sweat on his forehead. Upon hearing this, Sumu looked at the back of Luffy's head and then remembered that this man seemed to have been fighting for a long time. From Impel down to now, having been poisoned by Magellan, encountered wolves, and even passed through the gates of hell, it seems like I haven't had much rest at all. Now, on this battlefield, they must have expended a lot of energy fighting their way here. Luffy. Sumu reluctantly let go of Luffy's body and got off. Hey, bowl cut, what are you doing down here? Keep combining. Luffy was somewhat anxious when he saw Sumu break free of the fusion state. Upon hearing this, Sumu pursed his lips, about to speak, when a flash of yellow light appeared before his eyes. Uncle Kizaru actually came to their side. Yo, there are two of them here. With a single flash kick, neither Sumu nor Luffy had time to dodge and were sent flying solidly. Sumu gritted his teeth. Damn it, of all times, Kizaru has his eye on them again. Just as he was worrying, he and Luffy bumped into a thick arm. Sumu turned around and saw a familiar fish face. He then realized that Jinbe and a group of revolutionaries and pirates were blocking their way. Jinbe glanced at Sumu, then said to Luffy, "You two go save Ace, we'll take care of things here. We'll hold off the general for you." Upon hearing this, Luffy's fighting spirit was rekindled. Supporting his slightly trembling legs, he gritted his teeth and stood up. "Oh. We can't stop. Let's go, bowl cut." Luffy. Sumu frowned slightly. Seeing Luffy's attitude, he understood that the latter would never give up no matter what. The same was true when they rescued Robin. They were willing to sacrifice their health and lives to save them. "Hey Wan Luffy, I have another idea." Sumu exhaled and shouted to Luffy, who was about to run away. "Any solution?" Do you remember how I was clinging to you just now? Now you can become me and cling to me. I'll take you to the execution platform. You can take the opportunity to rest. Sumu explained to Luffy. Sumu also figured it out. It's the same principle whether Luffy is attached to him or he is attached to Luffy. After all, the two are bound together and will die together. If Luffy doesn't die, he won't die. With that, Sumu turned his back to Luffy and spread his arms wide. Come on, King Luffy, let's continue the fusion. Seeing this, Luffy's eyes lit up again, and he quickly nodded. Okay, bowl cut, combine. Then, mimicking Sumu's earlier actions, she hung herself on Sumu's body. The two became one again. But this time, Luffy is the commander. Pot-lid hair. Charge that way. For Luffy, there was always a feeling that Sumu was very similar to him, and that the two had an unspoken understanding. At this moment, they also showed unexpected trust in Sumu. Wang Luffy, hold on tight, we're leaving. With a soft shout, Sumu steadied himself and continued his charge forward. Rubber, machine gun. Sumu attacked forward frantically, his armament haki coating his fists, increasing their power. The group of Marines were immediately punched through a gap. But at that moment, a huge figure suddenly appeared next to Sumu. It was the giant Vice Admiral of the Navy, who came with his sword. Sumu glanced up and saw a giant sword swinging towards him, too fast to dodge. Pot-lid hairstyle. Luffy shouted hurriedly, his grip on Sumu's hand tightening involuntarily. Unexpectedly, Sumu raised his fist and met the giant sword head-on. Arcs of electricity flashed where fists clashed with blades. Sumu's eyes darkened, and he roared again. His muscles suddenly swelled, and with tremendous force, he pushed the blade back with a punch. Why? Upon seeing this spectacle, Luffy couldn't help but widen his eyes and exclaim in surprise. If it were him, he would definitely dodge such a counterattack if possible. But Sumu met the attack head-on and even deflected the sword back. Bowl cut, you're amazing. At this moment, Sumu saw the giant sword fly up, and his huge body was forced back several steps by the force, and he smiled slightly. Hee, this powerful feeling is so cool. If Sumu was somewhat hesitant in the previous battles, now that he has the get-out-of-jail-free card from One Piece, he has no worries whatsoever. Luffy would dodge such a slash, but with his armament haki, he's not afraid. Hancock's haki was already strong, and now that it's been copied and enhanced, it's naturally even more powerful. The Hand of God is very powerful. If Sumu could lock onto this ability value, he would definitely be a big shot in the pirate world. But when Sumu thought about the task of locking onto the ability, he frowned. Absolutely not. Kissing Ivankov is out of the question. At this moment, the giant marine who was forced to retreat repeatedly by Sumu was also shocked. He saw that Luffy was being carried by Sumu and figured he must be tired, so he planned to take advantage of the situation and capture the two of them at once. He had thought that as a vice admiral, he could easily take down a skinny, pretty boy brat like Sumu, but to his surprise, he was actually driven back. He wouldn't be too surprised if it were Straw Hat Luffy. After all, he's a pirate with a bounty of 300 million berries. But who is Sumu? How could he do it too? Straw Hat Boy, and, you. Damn it, are you the captain of which squad? Brat, I've never seen you before. To him, someone with Sumu's strength couldn't possibly be unknown. Sumu stared intently at the Vice Admiral, completely ignoring his question. He doesn't know himself, and he doesn't know him yet. Sumu clenched his fist, Luffy gripped his waist from behind, and pointed at the giant admiral, roaring. Bowl cut. Smash him. As soon as he finished speaking, Sumu leaped up, bit his thumb, puffed out his cheeks, and blew out a big breath. The fist suddenly swelled to a huge size, comparable to half the body of a giant. Page 14. Enter, third gear. You knocked me out of the game. You think you can. Kid, don't get too cocky. I am Vice Admiral Jander. Jia Induo raised his great sword, roared, and swung it with the force that had cleaved Sumu's fist in two. Sumu's fist kept spinning as he gathered power backward. When Luffy saw this, he felt as if he himself had entered gear third, and he shouted even louder. Bowl cut. Let's go. Rubber. Luffy and Sumu's voices overlapped in unison. Even though Luffy didn't make a move, his eyes were full of fighting spirit as he clung to Sumu. Giant spinning shot. Sumu and Luffy roared at the same time. Their voices seemed to pierce the sky. Sumu threw a punch, gathering all his strength, displaying the posture, demeanor, movements, shouts, and techniques of Luffy all identical to Luffy's. This is how Sumu changed after being copied. In an instant, fists clashed with blades. The deafening sound immediately reverberated throughout the entire battlefield. The pirates and marines in the midst of battle were all drawn to this. Everyone stared wide-eyed at the sight of the fist and the giant sword locked in midair. But it wasn't over yet. Sumu's eyes darkened, and the power in his hands increased dramatically. His armament haki was unleashed without reservation. Crack. At that moment, right before everyone's eyes, the giant sword shattered. Jaendo's expression changed drastically, as the giant fist seemed to grow larger and larger in his eyes. He could no longer dodge. Boom. The sound, like a giant cannon exploding, resounded throughout the entire sky. The giant admiral's head was hit, his teeth shattered, and his eyes instantly turned white as he lost consciousness. The battlefield was silent for a moment upon witnessing this scene, before erupting in uproar. Lieutenant General Gender. Many naval personnel gasped in surprise upon seeing the giant Vice Admiral fly backwards. This Lieutenant General is no ordinary man. His massive physique says it all, yet he was sent flying. When everyone saw the enormous fist, they immediately assumed it belonged to the current supernova, Straw Hat Luffy, but they were stunned when they saw the attacker. Who is this person? Giondo was actually sent flying. Damn it. Who is that brat? Zhangguo naturally saw this scene and couldn't help but grit his teeth. The look Sumu gave him earlier had already made him very unhappy. At this moment, right under his nose, they actually managed to take down one of their capable henchmen, Giondo. Besides, he's carrying Straw Hat Boy on his back. What kind of move is this? Meanwhile, Doflamingo, who was leisurely chatting with Crocodile, was also attracted by the loud noise. Looking up at Sumu, their youthful and delicate faces caused them to furrow their brows slightly. Doflamingo gave a knowing smile. Heh, that brat took down a Vice Admiral in one hit. Crocodile Demon, I've never seen him before. He's not a supernova, so he seems to be a hidden member of the Revolutionary Army. Doflamingo, mind your own business. This is a battlefield, all sorts of people are here. Let's talk about survival first. Crocodile glanced at Sumu and said in a deep voice. This kid. I think I saw him near Whitebeard when he ambushed him before. Yes, Whitebeard's hidden henchman. Whitebeard, Marco, and the others naturally noticed this scene as well. Upon seeing Sumu's figure and Luffy behind him, his eyes narrowed slightly. That's Ace's younger brother, being carried on someone's back. That kid's really good. Upon hearing this, the white-bearded man's lips curled slightly as he looked at Sumu. He sent Lieutenant General Giondo flying with a single blow. Kid, you're pretty capable. Ace, another powerful guy has come to save you. I can't just sit idly by. Squard, you foolish son, you will always be my son no matter what. Whitebeard patted Squard on the shoulder, who had just been misled by Akainu's words and stabbed him, and smiled gently. Immediately, despite his injuries, he jumped off the Moby Dick, his gaze lowered, looking ahead. Wow, bowl cut, like those from Sri Lanka. Luffy hung on Sumu's back, his eyes shining. This was the power of fusion. Sumu landed from the air and couldn't help but laugh upon hearing this. Looking at the fallen Vice Admiral, the fighting spirit in his eyes remained undiminished. At this moment, his adrenaline was surging. No one could stop him. Sumu took a deep breath. Wang Luffy. Oh, a bowl cut. Charge. The two shouted as if they were twins, and just as they were about to act, they felt the earth shake. Sumu used his observation haki to keenly sense a powerful aura and immediately turned to look at Whitebeard. The latter, unaware of what had happened, was already standing on the battlefield. At this moment, he formed his palms into claws, grasped the void, and pulled downwards, as if he wanted to tear the void apart. Sumu's expression changed drastically upon seeing this. Was Whitebeard about to unleash a powerful attack? You should know that the power of the Tremor fruit is not to be underestimated. Those towering waves that seemed to reach the sky were created by Whitebeard. At that moment, Whitebeard attacked again, and the earth shook violently. It felt as if the entire ground was about to be overturned. Chapter 8 Encirclement Plan. The world was turned upside down, and even the sea was torn apart, its surface divided into several sections. The entire Marineford was like a small sailboat bobbing on the surface of a giant wave of natural disaster. After a devastating wave of power, Marineford was reduced to ruins. The power of the Tremor fruit is terrifying. Sumu's expression changed drastically, and he struggled to steady himself. Looking at the dilapidated buildings and city walls around me, and the tilted island, a huge wave of emotion surged within me. Is this the strongest man in the world? His single strike seemed capable of overturning the entire world. But he didn't stop. Whitebeard leaped up and threw another punch into the air. Its shockwave instantly pierced through the battlefield, shattering walls and sweeping away everything it touched, heading straight for the execution platform. Boom! A violent explosion came from in front of the execution platform, and smoke immediately filled the air, obscuring everything on the platform. Upon seeing this, Sumu and Luffy's pupils constricted slightly, showing their shock. Whitebeard's attacks were incredibly fierce. Despite his ferocity, Sumu understood the anime's "no harm even with smoke" rule, and knew that Sengoku Garp on the execution platform would not be injured in the slightest. That attack was definitely blocked. As expected, after the smoke from the explosion cleared, the execution platform remained completely undamaged. Even Sengoku and Garp on the execution platform remained expressionless and motionless. Sumu looked down and, as the smoke completely dissipated, three figures with similar builds appeared. The Admiral's cloak fluttered in the wind, exuding an aura of majesty and power. It was Akainu, Kizaru, and Aokiji. They were all standing guard under the execution platform, blocking Whitebeard's devastating attack. Sumu frowned slightly. Just a moment ago, Kizaru was causing them trouble, and now it's over so quickly. The glint fruit is so fast. I wish I could let him rub against it. Page 15. But before Sumu could continue to be immersed in Whitebeard's explosive attack, Luffy suddenly shouted, "Keep going, bowl cut." The battlefield gives no one a chance to react, and Sumu was no exception. The shouts and screams only paused for a moment before they once again filled the entire battlefield. Hearing Luffy's urging, Sumu stopped and continued charging. To Sumu's surprise, there were very few Navy personnel left as they charged forward, as if they were making a routine retreat. But when they looked up again, they saw that countless sailors had already withdrawn from the bay and were now walking onto the square in Marineford. As Sumu ran, he paused for a moment, a sense of foreboding creeping into his heart. He surveyed the surrounding area and discovered that the pirates were still on the ice. Marineford is shaped like a crescent moon, with the central circle of the bay being the shape of the crescent. It's important to know that the Whitebeard pirates haven't actually stormed Marineford yet, they're still fighting in Aokiji's frozen bay. But at this moment, the Navy seemed to be plotting a conspiracy, mostly withdrawing from the ice surface of the bay, as if the ice surface was not a place to stay. Sumu took a deep breath, and a feeling gradually arose in his heart that he could no longer stay on this ice surface. Just as he reached the edge of the city wall and stretched out his arms to leap onto the square, a loud bang was heard. Boom! Along the winding, circular walls of Marineford, yet another layer of encirclement barriers has now risen up. This encirclement wall is higher and stronger than the previous walls of Marineford. Now it has risen up, and it is like a prison gate, sealing off the bay in a circle. It looks like a closed arena. On the walls, and inside the fortifications, cannons extended outwards, aimed at the Whitebeard pirates in the bay. Sumu was thrown by the encircling wall, flipping repeatedly in the air before landing on the ice. Looking up at the extremely tall iron gates around him, his pupils immediately contracted. He suddenly remembered that this was the encirclement plan of the Warring States period. Luring the pirates into the bay meant not only that the pacifists would attack from both sides, but also that these several raised encirclement walls would cut off the pirates' escape route. Furthermore, this encirclement plan is practically flawless. The pirates were surrounded, the Navy withdrew, and the pirates had nowhere to escape, like lambs to the slaughter. Furthermore, Sumu remembered that the enclosure was so sturdy that even Whitebeard couldn't break through it. All the pirates, including Whitebeard, were momentarily stunned when they saw the encirclement walls, unaware that danger was about to strike. The encirclement wall plan, what was the weakness of the encirclement wall plan again? Only Sumu kept looking around, remembering that the encirclement plan had flaws. Finally, a huge body came into Sumu's view. That was Little Oz lying in a pool of blood, already unconscious. Sumu looked closely and saw that the tightly encircling wall now had a gap on Little Oz's side. It was Oz's enormous body that stopped the rise of the encirclement wall. Damn, no wonder this was Oda's foreshadowing. That's awesome. Sumu couldn't help but curse. He was both surprised and delighted, yet it all seemed perfectly reasonable. The Whitebeard pirates are not in dire straits yet. Wang Luffy, you have a loud voice, shout with me. Sumu took a deep breath as he spoke. Everyone! Get out of this ice surface quickly. Everyone, charge towards the gap in Little Oz. This is their encirclement plan, they'll keep attacking the bay. Most of the Navy personnel have already evacuated. Before the ice melts, everyone rush to the plaza. Upon hearing this, Luffy, in a daze, also shouted along, repeating Sumu's voice. At that moment, Sumu and Luffy's voices immediately echoed throughout the entire battlefield. Almost all members of the Whitebeard pirates heard this warning. Upon hearing this, everyone reacted quickly and rushed toward the gap without the slightest hesitation. This is the mutual trust among pirates in battle. Seeing the pirates' swift reaction, Sengoku didn't wait any longer and immediately picked up the walkie-talkie to give an order to Akainu below. Sumu, who was also running towards the gap, naturally witnessed this scene. That old scoundrel from the Warring States period, what are you up to now? All that could be seen was that scorching magma was constantly gushing from Akainu's arms, and his whole body looked like a volcano about to erupt. Immediately afterward, Sumu saw Akainu raise his fist towards the sky, unleashing countless magma attacks. Meteor, volcano. Gazing at the lava meteorite falling from the sky like 10,000 cannons, Sumu's expression changed drastically, and he couldn't help but look at Zhangguo. Damn, what a brilliant tactic of closing the door and releasing Akainu. Huge lava projectiles rained down from the center of the bay. In an instant, the solid ice in the bay was constantly being hit by lava, and the sound of explosions filled the entire battlefield. Unable to escape, the Whitebeard pirates suffered heavy casualties, and the melting ice left them with nowhere to stand. If this continues, forget about rescuing Ace, the annihilation of the Whitebeard pirates is only a matter of time. Fortunately, thanks to Sumu's timely reminder, most of the powerful Whitebeard pirates members had already reached the gap in Little Orz's territory by the time Akainu unleashed Meteor Volcano. The Navy was also surprised that Orz Jr.'s body blocked the rise of the encirclement wall, and their forces obviously had not had time to defend against it. However, Akainu clearly did not want the pirates to escape easily, and the Meteor Volcano in his hand became even more ferocious. At this moment, what fell from the sky was almost twice the amount of magma meteorites that had just appeared. As the meteorite fell, a large portion of the ice in the bay melted instantly. The pirates fled frantically, dodging the meteorites, with no time to worry about breaking through the gap. But suddenly, the pirates in the bay let out a gasp, followed by cries of sorrow mixed with reluctance. As Sumu dodged the lava meteorites, he paused slightly upon hearing the shouts. Just then, a ship engulfed in flames came into view. The Moby Dick is on fire with lava. That's right, the giant ship that carried the Whitebeard pirates to the Marineford battlefield was finally ignited by the relentless attacks of the volcano. Sumu swallowed hard. Clearly, the pirates' brief groans were also due to this. After all, this giant ship holds countless memories from their past, the exhilarating battles fought by pirates, the joyous celebrations of banquets, and the dreams of the new era. Too many, too many. At this moment, Sumu saw that Whitebeard was standing in front of the burning giant ship, his figure still so domineering and awe-inspiring. For some reason, Sumu felt there was an added sense of apocalyptic desolation in it. The Moby Dick, the giant ship that carried them through a lifetime of battles, finally came to the end of its seafaring journey. Whitebeard turned back to look at his once invincible old buddy, his eyes flickering with a mixture of flames and faint tears. After a moment, he took a deep breath, looked resolutely ahead, and had already decided on his fate deep in his heart. Men, charge towards the breach. Rescue Ace. Then we can all return to the new world. Go for it. This deafening roar, powerful enough to pierce the battlefield, reached the ears of all the pirates, completely igniting their fighting spirit. Sumu and Luffy both shouted in unison. Of course. Having said that, the pirates charged toward the gap where oars had fallen with unstoppable force. However, the artillery fire from the wall quickly shifted, targeting the pirates heading towards the breach. The Marines knew that the only way for the pirates to enter Marineford's plaza was by going this way. The artillery fire from within the fortress immediately and without hesitation rained down. Sumu dodged the shells one by one, but he could never achieve the skill of passing through a field of flowers without getting a single petal on him. Under the torrential downpour of artillery fire, he was also suddenly thrown into the air. Sumu gritted his teeth and felt the impact of the explosion. Even with the defense of armament haki, he still felt a pain in his body. Page 16. The powerful shockwave blasted Sumu into the air. He barely managed to regain his balance, but the artillery fire continued relentlessly, like a relay race, bombarding him once more. Damn it! Sumu, carrying Luffy, was forced to descend rapidly from the sky. Sumu didn't bother to look down, assuming his feet were still on a patch of ice, but Luffy suddenly yelled. Pot-lid hair. Water. Oh no, I fell into the water. Upon hearing this, Sumu looked down and saw that the ice block beneath his feet had been melted away by Akainu's lava. Before he could react, Sumu fell into the sea. The icy seawater immediately enveloped Luffy and Sumu. Luffy's body immediately went limp, his eyes were on the verge of rolling back, and his arms around Sumu began to loosen but also tried to tighten. It was clear that he didn't want to lose his strength by falling into the sea. Oh no, I've fallen into the water. Sumu couldn't help but sigh. You know, devil fruit users are all landlubbers. Once they enter the sea, they are powerless and no different from cripples. How can they possibly return to the battlefield then? However, although Sumu's vision was blurry after falling into the water, he could clearly feel that he could move his body and that his strength was still there. Sumu was shocked and quickly grabbed Luffy as he fell, swimming upwards. Could it be because of the enhancement from God's hand? Or is it because he simply copied abilities and didn't eat a devil fruit? But in any case, he still has the strength to return to the battlefield. Luffy kept gurgling in Sumu's ear, his eyes constantly switching between pale and clear. Although he couldn't exert any force, Luffy was clearly unwilling to succumb to the power of the water. Sumu couldn't help but marvel at Luffy's terrifying perseverance in order to save Ace. He actually dared to try to overcome the power of the sea. Fortunately, Sumu still had strength. Outside, artillery fire raged, and scorching lava meteorites continued to fall into the sea. Despite the discomfort in his eyes underwater, Sumu struggled to swim to the surface. But you have to know, Akainu's meteor volcano can't stop so easily. Sumu saw several huge meteorites crashing towards the water surface where he was. His expression immediately changed drastically, and he began to swing his legs even faster. The meteorite was like a shackle preventing him from climbing ashore, giving him no time to swim upstream. Sumu could only do his best to dodge the powerful lava meteorites that kept crashing into the water. He had no time or energy left to swim upstream. He wasn't a very good swimmer to begin with, and with Luffy on his side, he did his best to avoid the lava. Fortunately, Sumu copied Luffy's abilities, greatly increasing his lung capacity and breath-holding time, which prevented him from falling into a desperate situation. Sumu gritted his teeth and glanced at Luffy beside him. Luffy kept blowing bubbles as if he didn't know how to hold his breath. If they don't get up there soon, Luffy will be finished sooner or later. Sumu gritted his teeth and dodged another stream of scalding lava. The lava poured into the water, making a hissing sound, and instantly created a cloud of bubbles in front of Sumu's eyes. Sumu could even feel the water around him heating up rapidly. But just when things were at their most precarious, as the bubbles passed by Sumu's eyes, a blue figure came into view. Chapter 9. Join Luffy as he faces off against the 3 Marine Admirals. Upon seeing the blue figure, Suumu's expression immediately changed, and then joy instantly appeared on his face. What? Yay, ping. Suumu couldn't help but shout out, forgetting that he was in the water, and immediately swallowed 2 large mouthfuls of water. That's right, the fishman who suddenly appeared in the water was none other than Jinbe, the former Shishibukai and Knight of the Sea. Just now, Jinbe also saw Suumu and Luffy being blasted into the water by the cannon. After dodging Akainu's meteor volcano, he also hurriedly jumped into the water. He understood that Luffy and Suumu were both devil fruit users. If left unattended, these 2 powerful forces will surely drown in the water. One is Ace's brother, and the other is possibly Ace's friend. They both came to rescue Ace. If they die in this way, who can accept it? At that moment, Jinbe also caught a glimpse of Suumu and Luffy in the water, and Luffy's condition was as he had expected. But to his surprise, Suumu still had the strength to hold Luffy and seemed to be able to swim. Did this kid not eat a devil fruit? Then what was with that huge fist that sent Jondo flying? Jinbe shook his head, no longer thinking about it, and looked up at Suumu. Suumu covered his throat and exchanged a glance with Jinbe across the deep, cold sea. Doraemon, hurry up and take us up there. Suumu put his arm around Luffy, whose brows were furrowed, as if he had also sensed Jinbe's arrival. His teeth were clenched, as if he was holding his breath, ready to erupt at any moment. Jinbe seemed to hear Suumu's thoughts. His gaze immediately darkened, and he shouted in the water, "Kid! I'll take you up there, but make sure you stand firm." Then, Jinbe twisted his body, waved his hand lightly, frowned, gritted his teeth, and roared at Suumu. Ocean current, over the shoulder throw. Upon hearing the roar, Suumu immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, they've arrived. Go and rescue Ace. Then, a current of seawater was seen being grabbed by Jinbe, who suddenly swung it over his shoulder like a tiger, charging straight towards Suumu and Luffy. The ocean current seemed to be getting closer and closer to Suumu. Suumu's eyes suddenly darkened and his body stiffened. Just as she was about to grab Luffy and swim against the current, Luffy suddenly felt a surge of power coming from somewhere. He suddenly gripped Suumu tightly. His white eyes snapped back to focus. It was as if he could already feel the waves rushing towards him. Suumu was slightly surprised. "Luffy, did you know they were going out?" But before Suumu could think any further, the powerful current of the sea instantly enveloped him. A tremendous force swept in, propelling Suumu rapidly toward the water's surface, yet it did not harm Suumu in the slightest. Jinbe, the Knight of the Sea, with his terrifying ability to control water. The waves crashed out of the water, and Suumu and Luffy immediately gasped for breath, but the giant wave showed no sign of stopping and continued to rush towards the sky. Its height instantly surpassed the towering encirclement wall, carrying Luffy and Suumu straight to the plaza of Marineford. Luffy released Suumu, stretched out one arm, and grabbed the mast of a giant ship that was being swept out by the sea, finally shaking off the feeling of powerlessness brought on by the water. Using the force of the waves, Suumu followed Luffy, flying straight towards the plaza in front of the execution platform. Meanwhile, the 3 admirals below guarded the execution platform, constantly hindering the Whitebeard pirates' attempt to breach the breach. Just as the pirates were being blown away by cannon fire and were on the verge of being targeted by the navy, a long and familiar shout rang out. "Give Ace back to me." Holding onto the mast and riding the waves, Luffy couldn't help but let out a loud shout. Upon hearing this sound, everyone couldn't help but look up at the sky. All that could be seen were the endless waves, which seemed to transform into countless stars above the square. 2 familiar and eye-catching figures were revealed by the splashing waves. Everyone was shocked and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. "Waves? Where did these waves come from? What's going on with them? They're so high. What's on the waves is Ace." Another shout rang out, and before everyone's eyes, the enormous wave finally lost its forward momentum and plummeted vertically. Finally, it exploded with a deafening roar right in front of the 3 generals. The force was overwhelming, shaking the heavens and the earth. The navy and the pirates who broke through the breach were all shocked. Sengoku and Garp straightened up in surprise. Who was it? Who broke through the encirclement so quickly? When the waves subsided, everyone looked and saw a straw hat appear in the center of the splashing waves. A figure all too familiar to everyone stood in the center of the crashing waves, kneeling on the ground, embracing a massive mast. Page 17. But that's not all that surprised everyone. Above the mast that Luffy was holding, a small, thin figure appeared. He held onto the upper part of the mast with one hand, his lower body seemingly suspended in midair, standing in a vertical line with Luffy, both exuding an aura of dominance. The momentum was awe-inspiring. When everyone saw the 2 people clearly, their eyes widened in astonishment. The unknown brat, Straw Hat Boy. Hateful. On the execution platform, Sengoku's face immediately turned ashen. He saw Suumu, and he saw Luffy. These 2 people were in his sight from beginning to end. And each time they made quite a scene. This is a complete disregard for him. Damn it, Garp. This is the grandson you raised. They're still brazenly and arrogantly causing chaos on this battlefield. At that moment, Garp looked at Luffy and his expression also turned grim. Luffy did cause trouble for the navy, but he really didn't recognize the guy above him. What exactly is that kid's relationship with Ace? On one side, after Sumu and Luffy landed, they both looked up and gazed at the three admirals of the navy in front of them. Seemingly inspired by Luffy, Sumu now showed no sign of backing down, even when facing the three admirals of the navy. The sight of the two facing off against the three admirals of the navy amidst the waves is not only imposing but also quite rare. Despite the awe-inspiring arrival of Luffy and Sumu, the three admirals of the navy remained unfazed. But I couldn't help but offer a few words of praise. Kizaru glanced at Sumu and Luffy and muttered, "Yo yo yo, it's already quite impressive that the two of you could come here. But can the two of you defeat us?" Akainu, without a trace of a smile, spoke in an extremely low voice, yet still offered a complimentary compliment. "Straw Hat Boy, you brats, pirates of the new era, humph, your strength is indeed impressive. If we let you grow unchecked, you'll definitely be a considerable problem for the navy. Therefore, you must be eliminated." Faced with Akainu's authoritative words, Sumu narrowed his eyes and looked at Luffy. Indeed, this battlefield is far too early for them. However, Luffy didn't care about whether he was an admiral or a marshal. He gritted his teeth and lowered his gaze. He showed no fear for Luffy. Nothing was more important than rescuing Ace at this moment. That's Luffy's personality and charm. With one hand resting on the mast, Sumu acted alongside Luffy, and the two faced the three admirals of the navy with no sign of being outmatched. Luffy lifted the mast, roared, and hurled it at the three of them. Using the momentum, Sumu leaped up, following closely behind the mast, and swung his long leg at Akainu in the center. "What kind of admiral are you? I've been putting up with Akainu for far too long." Although Sumu understood that he was no match for Akainu at this moment, he could still manage to fight him for a few rounds. After all, he can doubt Luffy's abilities now, but he absolutely cannot doubt Boa Hancock's strength. That's the Empress who fought the Blackbeard pirates in the later stages of the war and didn't give them a good beating. If Diamond Yozu could beat Aokiji to the point of vomiting blood, then Boa Hancock might be able to hold her own against Akainu. At this moment, the three admirals remained unmoved as Luffy threw the mast at them, allowing it to pass right through their bodies. The three are also Logia-type devil fruit users, so attacks without haki are completely ineffective against them. However, Sumu's arrival immediately caused the three of them to change their expressions slightly. Facing Sumu's fierce flying kick, Akainu's contemptuous gaze suddenly turned serious after sensing the powerful aura within it. He actually sensed a threat during that attack. He immediately raised his arms to block, but Sumu kicked him. A massive shockwave emanated from Akainu's arm. The block was somewhat hasty, and at this moment, Akainu was unconsciously forced to retreat by the impact of Sumu's fist. When Kizaru and Aokiji, who were standing next to Akainu, felt this powerful gust of wind, they were quite surprised. This kid in front of me actually has such aura and strength. As admirals, Kizaru and Aokiji were well aware of Akainu's strength. Before them, this Sumu not only managed to attack Akainu, but even forced him back several steps. This guy, even if he's not the best, he should at least be a squad leader. How come they've never seen this kid before? Skinny and weak, he doesn't look like a pirate at all. Shocked by the attack, Akainu immediately stopped underestimating Sumu and unleashed his power without reservation. Sumu gritted his teeth and planted a foot on Akainu's arms. When he looked up, he saw that scalding lava had instantly covered the latter's cheeks. The magma, after only a moment of accumulation, rushed toward Sumu with unstoppable force. Seeing the scalding lava coming towards him, Sumu's expression changed. If he were hit by that lava, even if his body was tough, a hole would still be torn in it. Immediately, Sumu used the force from the soles of his feet to roll backward repeatedly, dodging the magma attack and landing beside Luffy. Domineering. Kid, you're actually quite domineering. Akainu looked at Sumu, frowned, and then glanced down at his arm, his frown deepening. What kind of ability is this? I feel a piece of my skin being petrified. Upon hearing this deep, low shout, Sumu's lips curled into a slight smile. Surprised? Delighted? Do you still dare to underestimate him? Sumu had just used Hancock's devil fruit ability to forcibly petrify Akainu, but it was clear that his haki and ability were insufficient, and he could only petrify Akainu's skin. Moreover, this happened when Akainu underestimated his opponent and was careless. The Luffy he copied excelled in physical skills and strength, but lacked haki. During his 2 years of training, Luffy focused on learning and consolidating haki, which enabled him to become so much stronger. However, Sumu's copy of Hancock perfectly made up for this deficiency. In this way, Sumu would be equivalent to Luffy 2 years later with all the haki and the power of the love fruit. This strike will certainly not be light. Oh my, you're really fierce, kid. You brat, you actually have such a powerful aura, how terrifying. Kizaru looked at Sumu leisurely, but the contempt in his eyes was gone. It seemed that Sumu was still a tough nut to crack. Wong Luffy, forget about them, charge over there and save Ace. Sumu spoke in a deep voice to Luffy beside him, his eyes fixed on Ace kneeling on the execution platform. At this moment, thanks to Luffy, he also threw himself into the Marineford War and resolutely embarked on the path of rescuing Ace. He no longer resembled a college student at all. The battlefield was gradually eroding Sumu's character. Even Sumu didn't realize that as cannon fire exploded around him, he was subtly transitioning into the world of One Piece. Okay, let's go. As soon as Luffy finished speaking, he bent his legs and launched himself over the heads of the 3 admirals, heading straight for the execution platform. But how could the 3 admirals let Luffy off so easily? Uncle Kizaru transformed into specks of yellow light and flashed to Luffy's side in an instant. His movements were so swift that Luffy's expression changed slightly. Just as Kizaru was about to kick Luffy away, Sumu was already prepared. He wrapped his leg in armament haki and suddenly swung it up from below to meet the flash kick. Z-dash. An electric arc flashed at the point of clash. Kizaru's attack was blocked by Sumu, allowing Luffy to dodge and take another step away from the execution platform. However, Kizaru was not the only one of the 3 admirals of the navy. Aokiji also turned into ice shards and appeared in Luffy's path. Sumu had already done his best to stop Kizaru, and he simply didn't have time to spare to stop Aokiji as well. Sure enough, it would be quite difficult for the 2 of them to get past these 3 generals on their own. A sharp spike slowly materialized in King Zui's hand, and then he thrust it down towards Luffy. Whether it was because Luffy dodged or because Aokiji did it on purpose, the spikes did not hit Luffy's vitals. The spike pierced through his arm, and the immense force knocked Luffy to the ground. Page 18. Sumu frowned, looked at Luffy, and gritted his teeth. As expected, he was still stopped. Seeing Luffy fall to the ground after being hit, Aokiji remained expressionless, his attacks showing no sign of stopping. He then turned into tiny ice shards and reappeared in front of the fallen Luffy. Luffy gritted his teeth and endured the excruciating pain, looking at the Marine Admiral Aokiji in front of him, a chill rising within him. Sumu remembered that not long ago, Luffy and his crew had fought Aokiji. At that time, they were beaten so badly that they were powerless to fight back, and the memory of being frozen into ice statues was still vivid in his mind. At this moment, Luffy still has no way to deal with Aokiji. Chapter 10 Super Invincible Thunderbolt Luffy Turn. Aokiji, holding an ice spike, was about to plunge it deep into Luffy's body. Luffy's expression changed drastically. When he tried to dodge, he found that his body was unable to move under the extreme cold. Seeing Luffy captured by Aokiji and in imminent danger, Sumu felt a pang of worry. He immediately rushed towards Luffy and threw a punch at Aokiji, who was holding spikes, in an attempt to save Luffy from his predicament. But at that moment, a yellow flash suddenly blocked his way. Kizaru appeared and stomped on Sumu's fist. The incredibly powerful and imposing fist slammed into the sole of Kizaru's foot, who had come to block it. Sumu's eyes changed slightly, and his brows furrowed. He felt that all the power in his fist was blocked by Kizaru. Moreover, the latter remained calm and composed, without changing his expression. It was as if it was saying, "You blocked my way with your foot just now, and I'm returning the favor this time." Sumu frowned, looking at the sole of the foot on the fist, and a question immediately arose in his mind. Why isn't there a message saying copy failed from God's hand? Sumu originally thought that since his hand touched Kizaru, it should activate the power of God's hand, but it seems that he has to touch his skin first. With clothes and shoes blocking the way, it doesn't seem like a real touch. Sumu's eyes darkened. He smoothly and decisively kicked Kizaru's head while keeping an eye on Luffy, who was lying on the ground. If they didn't go soon, Sumu was genuinely worried that Luffy might get seriously injured. If you are seriously injured and lose your ability to fight, even if you don't die, you are basically out of the Marineford War. It's important to know that Luffy played a crucial role in saving Ace from behind. But Sumu's worries about Luffy were clearly unnecessary. Just as Kizaru easily blocked Sumu's horizontal kick, he saw a blue flame graze past him and suddenly shoot towards Aokiji. Marco, the captain of the 1st Division, came to Aokiji's side and kicked the spike to pieces, sending Aokiji flying as well. Just now, Marco saw Luffy and Suma being so aggressive and unable to defeat the Marine Admiral, so he rushed up to help them. Sumu stopped fighting Kizaru. He knew that although he was not at a disadvantage for the time being, he was still no match for Kizaru in the end. Sumu landed beside Luffy, who was covered in sweat and panting slightly. Luffy glanced at Marco and thanked him. Marco has the ability to fly, so breaking through the encirclement wall is naturally easy for him, but those behind him are not so lucky. Thinking of this, Sumu glanced at the gap in Little Oz's eyes again. At the breach amidst the constant barrage of artillery fire, Sumu was horrified to discover that Little Oz had woken up at some point. Furthermore, the pirates on the ice in the bay also jumped into the water. A giant wave surged across the bay, and a massive ship rose from the seabed, instantly carrying the pirates aboard. This giant ship was deliberately placed on the seabed by Whitebeard to prevent situations like this dead end from occurring. Just as there were strategies in the Warring States period, Whitebeard naturally had his own trump cards and backup plans. With his head covered in blood, Little Oz roared, picked up the giant ship that was coming towards him, and hurled it violently onto the plaza. The giant ship then rushed into the plaza, and the entire Whitebeard pirates were on board, now truly joining the battle and standing together on Marineford. Sumu glanced at the white-bearded leader. He truly lived up to his reputation as the world's strongest man, possessing unparalleled strength and strategic acumen. If it weren't for his serious illness, Whitebeard would have truly turned this place upside down. He would have been more than capable of rescuing Ace. Wang Luffy, do you still have any strength left? Sumu slowly stood up, looked ahead, and murmured a question. Luffy was panting heavily, his face showing exhaustion, but he still gritted his teeth and glared fiercely. That's obvious. Of course there is. Bowl cut. Let's go. Seeing Luffy still pushing through his weakness with boundless energy, Sumu couldn't help but be influenced by him. He let out a long sigh of relief, feeling his blood boiling. Alright, let's go. Charge towards Ace. As their shouts faded away, Aokiji, Kizaru, and Akainu paid them no further attention. As Sumu was puzzled, he saw that the three generals' gazes were all fixed on the figure below the giant ship. Whitebeard. With Whitebeard joining the battle, and after his earth-shattering slash that split Mount Hua in two, the three admirals turned all their hostility toward the world's strongest man. The three admirals clearly did not want to waste their time and energy on Sumu and Luffy. Sumu was delighted to see this. As long as the general didn't interfere with them, their path forward would undoubtedly be much smoother. Looking up at the execution platform not far away, Sumu raised his fist and charged forward. The execution platform looked quite close to them, but the distance between them was not short, and the closer they got to the execution platform, the more Navy personnel there were. Not only are they numerous, but they are also quite powerful. After all, they are so close to the execution platform that the elites are all stationed here. Sumu threw punch after punch, and thanks to the rubber's properties, he felt that it was much easier to throw punches. Through repeated attacks, Sumu gradually adapted to his current physical condition. These Paramecia-type devil fruits are really awesome. Facing the Marines who were neither Shishibukai nor Admirals, Sumu naturally handled them with ease, but due to their sheer number, he couldn't help but start to pant. Luffy, standing to the side, was also feeling unwell. His body was already on the verge of exhaustion, but with the support of perseverance and belief, Luffy managed to send many more Marines flying. After fighting for a while, the two returned to their respective sides, back to back. Sweat beaded on Sumu's forehead as he scanned the Navy approaching them. As if receiving some kind of order, the Navy focused their attacks on the two of them. Looking up at Sengoku, who was also looking down at the two of them from above, Sumu guessed correctly. As the marshal, Sengoku would not allow them to be so radical. Looking around, only Sumu and Luffy were charging ahead. If we don't raise our guard against the two and increase the intensity of our attacks, it's estimated that even without a naval admiral, the two might actually break through our defenses. After shifting their focus of attack, Sumu and Luffy were naturally surrounded by a group of Marines. Sumu gritted his teeth and looked at the Navy personnel wearing cloaks around him. These naval forces are all quite strong. If they were to fight them one by one, they would eventually be exhausted and die. That's right. Don't be fooled by the fact that these Marines might not be a match for Sumu individually. They're fighting a war of attrition. Those lieutenant generals are not so easy to deal with. It will take Sumu a lot of effort to defeat them. After Sumu defeated Vice Admiral Jaendo with a single giant spinning bomb, the impressive display of power made many people aware of Sumu's strength. Although they had never met Sumu, their impression of him was that he was as strong as a Shishibukai. Moreover, this person has a loud voice and only knows how to charge recklessly. If multiple people surround them on their path of advance, they can successfully block or even annihilate the two of them. Of course, this would require sending a considerable number of vice admirals and generals. At this moment, Sumu and Luffy both frowned as they faced these people wearing cloaks and exuding an imposing aura. Luffy was clearly exhausted, and although Sumu was in good condition, he couldn't withstand such a drain on his opponent. Phew. Wang Luffy, I have a way to break through this encirclement, it just depends on whether you're willing to do it. Sumu spoke slowly, his gaze still sweeping over the approaching Navy. What method? Bowl cut, stop arguing. I'll do anything to save Ace. Upon hearing this, Luffy responded in a low, deep voice. Okay, then I'll start. Sumu Zheng's Luffy agreed and immediately nodded. Page 19. Then, his gaze turned indifferent as he looked at the group of arrogant and ignorant sailors and let out a cold laugh. Wang Luffy, I. Sumu suddenly stepped forward, grabbed Luffy's body, stretched out his arm, and wrapped Luffy up in circles. Wang Luffy, become my sword. Hey, what's going on? What's happening? Luffy was completely bewildered when he saw Sumu's outstretched hand tightly entwining him, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Seeing Luffy's reaction, Sumu also curled his lips and swept his gaze over the group of Marines, immediately exuding a powerful aura. Let me show you the power of the future Pirate King. Wang Luffy, I, use your iron fists to knock them out. Rubber. A tool character in One Piece. Sumu grabbed Luffy and started spinning wildly in place like Demacia. With his arms lengthening, he instantly spun Luffy around like a top, repeatedly flinging him towards the surrounding Marines. With his exceptionally high battle intelligence, Luffy quickly grasped Sumu's intentions. He immediately ducked his neck, pulled out a fist, and as Sumu spun around, he slammed the fist hard across the faces of the group of Marines. This super invincible spinning top, with a diameter of 10 meters, has an extremely wide attack range. At the same time, due to the combined power of Luffy and Sumu, the power is by no means weak. And Luffy only needs to throw one punch. This not only saved Luffy's stamina, but also gave the two of them a good opportunity to deal damage. Sumu wrapped Luffy's body in layers with his arms, adding armament haki protection to ensure that Luffy would not be harmed. I'm a fucking genius. One Luffy, charge. With a loud roar, Sumu exerted even more force in his arms, spinning at an extremely fast speed, almost drilling a hole in the stone beneath his feet. He didn't know that Luffy could fly and dive without getting dizzy, and he wouldn't get dizzy even if he copied Luffy's abilities. Since we're not afraid of getting dizzy, let's turn this place upside down. How could a mere Navy officer, a mere Vice Admiral, not dodge this deadly Luffy spinning top? Charge! One Luffy. Sumu roared again, and Luffy couldn't help but shout along, not only waving his fists incessantly but also struggling to kick. Rush! Charge! OMG! Just as Sumu was about to take it a step further, tensing his muscles to unleash even greater power, a yellow-clad figure slipped from his grasp and flew into the air. Gazing at that familiar yellow figure, Sumu stopped involuntarily, then paused, momentarily stunned. Damn it! One Luffy. Because of Luffy's struggle, Sumu accidentally threw Luffy away instead of handling him properly. Luffy, who was suddenly thrown out, was naturally stunned for a moment, but thought it was Sumu who did it on purpose. He immediately raised his eyes and flew towards the execution platform like a superhero. Rubber, Superman. Sumu clapped his hands in a panic and ran towards Luffy's direction. Fortunately, the Marines who had surrounded him had been scattered because of his and Luffy's combined attack, so Sumu's running route was not so crowded. As Luffy ascended to heaven and drew ever closer to the execution platform, he looked at Ace, who was now within arm's reach, and couldn't help but shout, "Ace! I am coming!" When Ace saw Luffy flying towards him from the execution platform, he showed no joy, but instead his eyes were filled with worry. You should know that the execution platform is far more dangerous than what they are below. Sumu also knew that Luffy would never go to the execution platform so easily. He caught a glimpse of Zhanguo's arm twitching slightly, as if he was about to make a move. But before Sengoku could make a move, a familiar yellow flash appeared again in front of Luffy as he took flight. It's Kizaru again. Wasn't this guy fighting Whitebeard? Why did he run back after losing? Kizaru pouted, glanced indifferently at Luffy in the air, and then unleashed a flash kick. With nowhere to dodge in midair, Luffy took the kick head-on. Boom! With a dull thud, Luffy crashed to the ground like a bird with broken wings. Sumu frowned, casually punched the Navy officer in front of him, and then kicked him several times, forcibly petrifying a Vice Admiral. Looking towards where Luffy had fallen, and seeing that Luffy had landed at Ivankov's feet, Sumu finally breathed a slight sigh of relief. Well done, Kizaru. All you do is launch surprise attacks. No wonder you have the fastest devil fruit. But then he started panting heavily, sweat dripping from his forehead. Getting to the execution platform was even more difficult than he had imagined. The speed at which Admiral Kizaru provided support was indeed too fast. Not only was Luffy exhausted, but Sumu was also getting tired. He had lost count of how many Marines he had defeated, including some powerful Vice Admirals. Sumu wiped the sweat from his forehead. Fortunately, he had copied the Empress's abilities, otherwise, he would have been the one shot down by Kizaru and lying exhausted at Ivankov's feet. Ultimately, Luffy's exhaustion at Marineford was due to his fight all the way from Impel Down, and he had been relying on sheer willpower to keep going. Sumu is stronger than Luffy, but he doesn't have Luffy's perseverance. If he were to fall into a situation where he lacks stamina, Sumu might not be able to stand up like Luffy. We must copy another one, a better one. Sumu muttered to himself, scanning the targets on the battlefield. After scanning the area, Sumu couldn't find a good target. Just as he was at a loss, a figure emitting blue flames caught his eye. That was Marco. At that moment, for some unknown reason, he rushed straight toward the execution platform. He wanted to save Ace in one fell swoop. But just as Marco approached the execution platform, a white figure appeared. His navy cloak billowed in the wind, and his right fist was already clenched. Chapter 11 Phoenix Fruit. The navy cloak fluttered in the wind, and the man's appearance gradually became clear. It was none other than Garp, who had been standing next to Ace the whole time. Garp couldn't help but intervene when he saw Marco approaching the execution platform. Upon seeing Garp, Sumu's pupils shrank dramatically. This man, despite being a lieutenant general, was a figure comparable to a marshal. Before he could think any further, Garp swung his fist and slammed it hard into Marco's body. Love's iron fist was simple, straightforward, and decisive. With just one punch, Marco fell from the sky like a cannonball. Marco, the 1st Division commander of the Whitebeard pirates, who was invincible, was actually knocked down and subdued with a single punch. Sumu caught a glimpse of Marco's blue flames, which seemed to be on the verge of being extinguished. Furthermore, its body grew larger and larger in Sumu's eyes, as if it was about to crash down on him. Hey, no way. Sumu couldn't help but cry out, and hurriedly tried to dodge, but Marco was too fast. By the time he reacted, Marco was already on his face. My darn thing. Boom. Marco crashed into Sumu, and a loud noise followed. The immense force was like a bulldozer, scraping a long groove in the hard ground. Sumu just felt a tremendous force on his body, and he couldn't stop it at all. Is this Garp's power? Fortunately, Sumu possessed the power of the gum-gum fruit, so being hit by Marco didn't hurt as much as he had imagined. Page 20. Ouch. Ouch. Marco clutched his head and neck, gritted his teeth and cried out in pain, then looked up at Garp's domineering appearance with fear in his eyes. This injury won't heal anytime soon. Little horse, get up quickly, get off me first. Sumu was sat on by Marco, and kept pushing Marco with his hands, struggling to stand up. Marco also noticed Sumu beneath him, immediately rolled over to his feet, and then, despite the pain, looked apologetic. Sorry, I didn't mean to bump into you. Sumu slowly stood up, supporting himself on the ground. He sighed and couldn't help but complain about Marco. Honestly, why did you have to provoke Garp in the first place? Not only did I provoke him, but I also bumped into him. Sumu was speechless. How could he have run into such a huge battlefield? It was truly unbelievable. Ding! God's hand successfully copied. Damn, that was a good hit. Upon hearing this, Sumu suddenly realized that he had just touched Marco. All his previous resentment instantly turned into joy. Ding! You have gained all of Marco's abilities. Gained the ability of Bird Fruit, Mythical Zoan Type, Phoenix Form. Strengthen Armament Haki, Observation Haki, and Physical Techniques. As the notification sounds faded, Sumu slowly opened his eyes, feeling as if his entire body had been reborn, completely refreshed. All the fatigue I had felt earlier had completely disappeared. Furthermore, Sumu could clearly feel the ever-flowing flame of life within his body. The Phoenix's blue flame. Sumu took a deep breath. What level is Marco at? Whitebeard's right-hand man. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he is the #1 person below the 4 emperors. Furthermore, having seen the latest plot, he naturally knew that Marco's strength was considerable, as he single-handedly fought against Big Mom, one of the 4 emperors, and also against King and Queen, 2 of Kaido's first mates. In this way, he copied Marco. So, on this battlefield at the top, wouldn't he no longer have to worry about his life being threatened? After all, with Marco's healing abilities, as long as Sumu isn't surrounded by the 3 generals, it would be difficult for him to die. Of course, you also can't mess with those 2 on the execution platform. Sumu tried to calm himself down and looked at Garp and Sengoku in front of the execution platform. Garp stood before the 3 admirals' seats, then slowly sat down in the middle seat, his arms crossed, exuding an aura of dominance. If you want to get through here, kill me first. The voice was authoritative and domineering, and when it reached Marco's ears, it made him grit his teeth in resentment and fear. Sumu couldn't help but sigh upon hearing this. In that case, it would be difficult to get onto the execution platform. With Garp, whose strength is almost comparable to Whitebeard, guarding the execution platform, it would be extremely difficult to get past him. Fortunately, it might have been difficult for someone else, but they have a connection here, the pirate, King Luffy. Luffy will have to go through Garp's challenge otherwise, no one else will be able to help. Thinking about it, Sumu glanced at Luffy not far away. At this moment, Luffy lay helplessly at Ivankov's feet, struggling frantically and grabbing at Ivankov's feet. Upon seeing this, Sumu frowned. As expected, Luffy's body couldn't withstand Kazura's attack. He probably wanted Ivankov to give him an injection of stimulant hormones to get him back into the fight. Sumu also knew that Luffy's lifespan had been significantly reduced during the Marineford War. As a One Piece fan, he had worried more than once that Luffy would die too soon. First came the injection to combat the deadly poison, then the injection to boost his spirits. He truly admired Luffy's unwavering determination to never give up. At the same time, it's true that Luffy is needed on this battlefield. After all, apart from Luffy, it seems that no one else can get past Garp and reach the execution platform. Wow! Sumu let out a long sigh and looked at his hand, where a blue flame emerged from his palm. It was warm but not hot to the touch, and it also gave off a faint sense of life. This feeling is so wonderful. Sumu couldn't help but sigh, his eyes fixed on the center of his palm. Could this ability allow him to fly? Thinking it over, Sumu closed his eyes and absorbed the information that had entered his mind. He had thoroughly learned how Marco used this ability. Thump! Suddenly, Sumu opened his eyes wide and spread his arms out, which had transformed into wings that were emitting blue flames. In appearance, it is indeed no different from Marco. It's just that Sumu is only 1.75 meters tall, not as tall as Marco who is over 2 meters, and his wings look a bit small. Wow! It really turned into wings. Sumu looked at his hands, his eyes gleaming with golden light. His arms transformed into wings, as if he could take off with a mere flap. Furthermore, the blue flames on its wings were exceptionally active, and the striking blue light instantly attracted many people. Even Marco himself, standing to the side, looked over at Sumu. Upon sensing that familiar aura, Marco's eyes widened involuntarily. Nanny! What kind of fruit is this? It's so similar to my ability. Kid, what kind of devil fruit did you eat? Marco frowned and asked, having witnessed the brat's fists grow larger and his arms extend. But then blue flames appeared again. What kind of devil fruit power is this? It's so eerie. Okay. Upon hearing this, Sumu, who was just about to take off, turned his head and exchanged a glance with Marco. Then, a slight smile appeared on his lips. Want to know my secret? If you want, go look for it in the ocean. I left everything there. What? What the hell? Marco frowned, looking completely bewildered, upon hearing these familiar words. Humph. Sumu ignored Marco, suddenly spread his wings, and took to the air. He couldn't very well tell Marco that he had a system, so playing dumb was the best course of action at this moment. Riding the air currents upwards, a cool breeze came naturally, and the freedom of soaring through the sky made Sumu exclaim with delight. This feeling is so much like gliding and skydiving. And this kind of flying was effortless. He felt like he had truly transformed into a phoenix, flapping his wings and soaring high into the sky. Looking down at the battlefield, Sumu suddenly felt as if he had escaped from the oppressive atmosphere. By copying Marco's abilities, Sumu finally gained some initiative in this war. That was fucking awesome. One Luffy, get up right now, let's go save Ace. Sumu roared loudly in the sky, his voice descending from high to low, causing the Marines and pirates to look up. Is that Marco? Wait, that's the kid next to that Straw Hat kid. How come his abilities are the same as Marco's? This kid is so weird. The members of the Whitebeard pirates couldn't help but sigh when they saw Sumu's appearance. This kid's abilities are so damn similar to Marco's in their group. Page 21. At this moment, veins bulged on the forehead of the Sengoku on the execution platform, his face filled with rage. Sumu's arrogance attracted attention, which made his face turn ugly. Kid, you're being far too arrogant. Utterly arrogant. You have no respect for anyone. If you want to save people, you'd better stay away from me. He never took Sumu seriously because he thought Sumu wasn't worth his attention. Compared to Whitebeard, and compared to the captains of the various divisions, Sumu, this nobody, is nothing. But Sumu kept appearing in his sight, challenging his authority. A giant fist sent Vice Admiral Jaender flying, breaking through the encirclement to fight 3 admirals. And even more, he sent so many Vice Admirals flying along the way. At this moment, he was soaring freely as if no one else was around, not treating this as a battlefield, and even loudly calling on Garp's grandson to come up and save Ace. This is an utter insult to their navy, like repeatedly defecating on their heads. It's absolutely intolerable. All Marines, give it your all and stop Straw Hat Boy and that brat. We absolutely cannot let them break through. Concentrate your firepower. Zhangguo shouted angrily into the walkie-talkie in his hand. Clearly, Sumu had offended him. On the other side, after much pleading, Luffy finally got a needle pricked by Ivankov. Then, a change occurred in his body, and his power surged forth again. Upon hearing Sumu's words, he immediately opened his arms, looked up at Sumu in the sky, and murmured, "Bowl cut, stop rambling, I know. Ace. I am coming." Sumu smiled slightly when he saw Luffy stand up again. Then, with Luffy below and Sumu above, the two charged toward the execution platform once more. The battle begins once again. On the square, Whitebeard panted heavily, glancing up at Sumu in the sky. He then spat out a mouthful of blood, and despite the pain, a slight smile appeared on his lips. "Kid, you're really going all out. In that case, I have to pull myself together." With a deep, heavy shout, Whitebeard braced himself against the ground, brandished his blade, and suddenly straightened up. He swung his blade and once again took the hit head-on from Akainu's sudden attack with a lava fist. At this moment, he was naturally engaged in a fierce battle with Akainu and Aokiji, and he was not afraid of the 2 admirals of the navy. However, Marco, who was not far away, frowned deeply. He could see that his father's condition was obviously worsening. If the fight continues, his physical condition will likely deteriorate further. This concern was not unfounded at this moment. Whitebeard's movements were gradually slowing down. Suddenly, a dry cough was heard, and the white-bearded man's body went limp, causing him to kneel down on one knee and spit out another mouthful of blood. But the opponent is a naval admiral. How could they miss such an opportunity? Akainu immediately flashed forward and punched Whitebeard in the chest. The scorching magma erupted, splattering blood everywhere and leaving a gaping, bloody hole in Whitebeard's body. Whitebeard's injuries have become even more severe. "Dad! Dad!" Upon witnessing this scene, the pirates were all shocked and cried out in alarm. Marco yelled and charged towards Whitebeard, his hands already covered in blue flames, ready to heal him. But that annoying Kizaru was everywhere, and several beams of yellow laser light immediately blocked Marco's path. Upon seeing their commander seriously injured, the Whitebeard pirates immediately panicked. "Damn it, Dad!" These shouts of concern were so loud that Sumu, who was swooping down on the navy from above, stopped in his tracks and looked towards the crowd. Sumu stared at the bloody, dark wounds on the white-bearded man's body, momentarily stunned. He swallowed hard, feeling a pang of heartache. Was that a wound that a person could bear? He saw Whitebeard cough up blood, barely managing to repel Akainu after taking a hit from him. But at that moment, many of the navy soldiers immediately drew their swords and thrust them toward Whitebeard's chest. "Stop it!" Marco roared, his eyes gleaming, but Admiral Kizaru beside him was like a persistent leech, firing several more laser beams that pierced through his body. Marco collapsed to the ground in excruciating pain, looking resentfully at the group of sailors wielding swords. With his health in dire straits, Whitebeard had no chance to dodge and could only let the blade pierce his body. The surrounding artillery fire instantly added to the damage, causing Whitebeard's body to sway and almost fall. Dad! Upon seeing this, not only Marco, but all the pirates were shocked and filled with worry. Is the world's strongest man about to fall? On the execution platform, Ace kowtowed and roared at his father with all his might. Only now did he realize how precious life is. Looking at the white-bearded man about to fall, his vision blurred, and he was filled with self-blame and deep remorse for acting impulsively and ignoring advice. I regret being captured. Why didn't I listen to Whitebeard and insisted on leaving the ship to chase Blackbeard? Those cold handcuffs were the cruelest form of torture, forcing Ace to witness his friends die tragically while trying to save him, yet he was powerless to do anything about it. The blood-soaked battlefield tormented him deeply. Seeing this scene, Sumu couldn't help but feel a few tears welling up in his eyes. He no longer seemed like an outsider at all. He had only one thought in mind, to rush forward and protect Whitebeard, who was being attacked from all sides. Whitebeard's charisma had deeply impressed him even before he transmigrated, and now, standing on the edge of the battlefield, his feelings were even more profound. Seeing the white-bearded man endure such an attack, Sumu felt a deep, indescribable pain in his heart. He turned his head, abandoning his march toward the execution platform, and flapped his wings, heading toward the white-bearded man. But at this moment, on the battlefield, centered on Whitebeard, a majestic aura suddenly emanated. The white-bearded man, who was about to fall, suddenly found immense strength in his waist, supporting his body as he slowly stood up. It was as if he knew that Sumu, who was charging ahead, was going to give up his breakthrough and turn back towards him. A majestic yet inspiring voice rang out. It resounded throughout the entire battlefield. It reached Sumu's ears. Kid, get back to where you were and continue your own attack. I don't need you to save me. I'm Whitebeard. Chapter 12, Combination of 3 Devil Fruit Abilities. What you need to do is go and save Ace. Whitebeard's voice was incredibly deep, penetrating the battlefield as if it were spoken specifically to Sumu and Luffy. His powerful observation haki allowed him to detect that the two most likely to save Ace were Sumu and Luffy, because he seemed to be turning back. How could he allow himself to slow down the two of them? This thunderous shout immediately stunned Sumu. Sumudun, suspended in midair, looked at the white-bearded man with trembling eyes, unable to calm his emotions. He felt his blood flowing extremely fast, and his heart beating faster than ever before. Whitebeard's words made him realize that he and Luffy were gradually becoming key figures at Marineford. Unlike his previous casualness, Sumu now seemed to have a heavy burden on his shoulders. Not long ago, he was just a rookie, but now he is someone who has gained Whitebeard's trust and reliance. Page 22. All of this stemmed from the attention he attracted from others after copying Luffy and following him through various challenges. That impressive performance and the massive attack made Sumu the most noticed character on the battlefield. That's right, he seems to have more screen time than Straw Hat Luffy. Sumu was involved in the one-on-one fight against the 3 admirals of the Navy. He was involved in sending Jaendo flying with his giant fist, he swept away the Navy soldiers blocking his way, and he was involved in the clash with Hawkeye. Its transformation into a bluebird at this moment has surprised many people. Sumu seems to be attracting more attention than Luffy. In addition, he kept following Luffy, so much so that everyone gradually heard his name Bowl Cut. That's right, charge, Bowl Cut, go rescue Ace. Suddenly, a chorus of voices arose around Whitebeard. The voices joined in. Yeah, who do you think your dad is? He doesn't need your help at all. Bowl Cut brat, get Ace out of here. We're here for Dad. As these voices were spoken one by one, Sumu gradually saw a group of Whitebeard Pirates Division captains appear in his field of vision, and a whole host of his subordinates. When they saw that Whitebeard was injured, they were quite close to him, so they immediately came over and stood around him one by one. There are Jinbe, Yozo, Vista, Izzo, Bramank. At that moment, Whitebeard was surrounded by them, his towering height making him stand majestically in the center, his eyes regaining their haughty air. At this moment, the aura of a powerful figure reappeared on Whitebeard. Dad! Marco, who had struggled to his feet, couldn't help but laugh when he saw this. Whitebeard's actions were the greatest encouragement to them. It's as if that dashing, white-bearded man, the strongest man in the world, has returned. That's it. Sumu murmured, then glanced at the scene below and suddenly laughed. I understand, okay, then. He glanced at the execution platform again, his eyes darkening. Wang Luffy, it's time for us to go up. Below, Luffy kicked a marine away. Fueled by his adrenaline-fueled energy, he was even more excited than before, and his movements were even faster. Sengoku was clearly targeting the two of them, and the marines gradually began to surround Luffy again. Sengoku also ordered that the Navy's attack focus be shifted towards the two of them. At all costs, their path of advance be blocked. Sumu originally wanted to fly directly to the execution platform, but then he remembered the scene of Marco being beaten by Garp, and immediately gave up the idea. Sumu's eyes narrowed, the blue flames on his body burned even more fiercely, and he flapped his wings, rapidly plummeting towards Luffy. He streaked down from the sky like a blue shooting star. As soon as Luffy looked up, there was a loud bang beside him. The Marines who had been thrusting their swords at him were all sent flying by the impact of Su Mutong's landing. Sumu supported himself with one hand on the ground, slowly raised his head, and looked at the astonished navy around him, his eyes filled with passion and a hint of enjoyment. So, isn't the taxi driver who fell from the sky handsome? Are you scared? Unexpectedly, the moment Sumu landed in the crowd, the navy, as if finding an outlet, instantly transformed into a stream of people and rushed towards him. They also identified the two people whom the warring states ordered to be eliminated, and now they were all here. Holy crap! Sumu was shocked to see the densely packed navy forces around him. What was going on? How come there are so many navy personnel now? I remember Luffy didn't have that many challenges when he was clearing stages in the anime. Could it be that my actions went too far and provoked public outrage? Sumu dared not underestimate that group of navy men, some wearing cloaks and some not. Even with top-tier Yonko commander-level abilities, being ganged up on by so many admiral-level marines wouldn't be so pleasant. Furthermore, Sumu also noticed that Admirals Kizaru and Aokiji had abandoned their engagement with Whitebeard and instead came to surround them. If a general were to also participate in this operation to eliminate them, they would certainly be difficult to deal with. This situation is probably difficult for him and Luffy to resolve on their own. Luffy walked to Sumu's side, clenching his fist. He naturally didn't think too much about it. Even if there were countless generals ahead of him, he would charge forward without hesitation. Sumu noticed the numerous bumps and bruises on Luffy's body, took a deep breath, and gently waved his hand. Blue flames then ignited on Luffy's body. This is the power of the phoenix fruit. The blue flames can help others recover from injuries. Oh, fire, what is this? It's not hot at all. Luffy looked at the blue flames on his body and exclaimed in surprise. That's my ability, it can help you heal your wounds. Juan Luffy, time is running out, hurry up. The Navy is really planning to execute Ace ahead of schedule now. Looking at the densely packed, layered naval crowd, Sumu frowned deeply. As he said, it was about time when Sengoku wanted to execute Ace ahead of schedule. If they don't hurry, they definitely won't be able to rescue Ace. I see. As soon as Sumu finished speaking, Luffy shot into the crowd of Marines like an arrow released from a bow. Seeing this, Sumu felt his scalp tingle, but there was nothing he could do. All he could do was fight his way out of the encirclement. This is the Battle of Marineford. In war, there is no room for complacency. At this moment, Sengoku, standing on the execution platform, stared at Luffy and Sumu, who had already reached the bottom of the platform. If he hadn't ordered the Navy to launch a massive attack on the two, they would probably have already broken through to his front. At that point, I'll need to take action myself. When a marshal joins the battlefield, the course of the war changes. Humph, how fast can you be? Do you even have time? The execution is about to begin. Kids, it's time for you to stop here. Surrounded by so many Marines, it's over. Sengoku shook his head slightly. Although he felt a sense of hatred for Sumu and Luffy at the forefront, he also felt a sense of regret for them. If only those two kids had chosen to join the Navy back then, they would be vice admirals now. Unfortunately, it's all over now, Ace. They will die on this battlefield before you do. Garp, sitting in the general's chair below, had a somber and melancholic expression. He was well aware of Sengoku's actions at that moment. Clearly, his old friend, who had fought alongside him, was now focusing the Navy's attack on his grandson and that brat. Having served in the Navy for many years, Garp knew the Navy's strength all too well, and he was also aware of Luffy's strength. Under such an encirclement, Luffy would definitely not go far. Is he about to lose his second grandson? Garp's hands were clenched, and his body trembled involuntarily. Are his two grandsons, whom he raised from childhood, going to perish because of the very word justice to which he has dedicated half his life? Just as Garp was struggling to breathe under the weight of those two words, two angry roars suddenly came from the crowd, making him look up instantly. His eyes widened instantly. Upon hearing this, the warring states above also looked up sharply and saw the scene below, causing his eyes to tremble slightly. Below, the once impenetrable Navy no longer appeared to be surrounding them. The naval personnel were actually cut in half by those two small figures. What? The Navy's encirclement is being torn apart bit by bit. Sengoku was shocked and couldn't believe it. Those two boys actually had such strength. After fighting this long, do they still have the stamina? Gum gum. Giant dual guns. Just as everyone was shocked, two similar shouts rang out again across the battlefield. Suddenly, Sumu and Luffy, one on each side, simultaneously unleashed a massive punch. Page 23. The overwhelming momentum immediately shook the entire battlefield. At this moment, Luffy and Sumu are fighting with increasing ferocity. As long as the admirals above them don't intervene, who can stop them? Furthermore, Sumu possesses the abilities of three fruits, making his fight effortless. Marco's Phoenix fruit is primarily used to increase defense and restore his own health. Hancock's Love fruit is primarily used to enhance her attack power, petrifying enemies and rendering them unable to fight. Luffy's Gum fruit provides additional optimization effects, increasing his health bar, improving his durability, and expanding his attack range. After Sumu copied all these abilities, he had already figured out how to allocate and use them. This is top-tier awareness from a player on the Chinese server of the game. Rubber. Petrified Whip. With a roar, Sumu channeled armament haki into his legs, activated Hancock's petrification ability, and swept a group of Marines with a single kick. Instantly, the immense force petrified the areas where the Navy was struck, turning entire groups of Marines into stones. They were all sent flying. The destructive power of this attack is simply too great. Sumu smiled. He had seen that even several admirals in the Navy could not withstand this sweeping attack. Rubber. Jet. Machine gun. Immediately afterwards, Sumu unleashed his ultimate technique once again, a wide-range attack. Second gear machine gun. Fists rained down on the Navy like a storm. Those who can dodge can only use their ultimate agility to shave away. Those who cannot dodge will only be hit by a punch. This punch will not only severely injure them, but it will also turn them into stone, leaving very little room for error. In an instant, another large area fell in the region that Sumu attacked. On the battlefield, upon witnessing this scene, many powerful figures were astonished and exclaimed in amazement. Petrified. What kind of devil fruit user is this kid? On one side, Sengoku frowned. So far, he had already seen this brat Sumu display 3 different abilities. What kind of fruit is this? He'd never even heard of it. Hey, so many Marines have been petrified. Where did this kid come from? Doflamingo stood leisurely to one side, and when he saw Sumu display such strength, he couldn't help but frown. He knew that if he were to venture into this battlefield, he wouldn't be as efficient and fierce as Sumu. Even someone as strong as Sumu, why had he never heard of this kid's name or seen his face? Defeating the giant Jando before was nothing special. Seeing their aggressive approach just now, he thought their path forward had come to an end. Unexpectedly, their strength was more than that. But Doflamingo understood that the most important person wasn't Straw Hat Luffy, but the one next to him who looked even more immature than Luffy. This kid's going to be on the Navy's radar after this battle. At this moment, the Empress, who was taking advantage of the chaos on the battlefield and occasionally kicking 2 Marines away as a Shishibukai, also witnessed the Marines being petrified. Immediately, Hancock frowned slightly, a hint of confusion appearing in her beautiful eyes. These abilities to petrify so drastically were very similar to her own. Looking at Sumuna's retreating figure as he fought Luffy with unbridled passion, Hancock murmured, "This man just released my petrification on his own. He's truly unfathomable." Luffy, who exactly is he? Where did you first meet this person? After a brief rest, Whitebeard and his crew rejoined the battle. Seeing the 2 men ahead so fierce, they immediately burst into laughter. Sure enough, they hadn't misjudged him. So, everyone gritted their teeth and followed Whitebeard, taking the initiative to attack the most powerful members of the Navy. At this moment, Sumu and Luffy worked together, charging deeper and deeper. Even with the Navy surrounding them on all sides, they continued to forge ahead, completely ignoring the Navy behind them and only focusing on charging forward. If it weren't for Sumu's reply and the significant petrification, the 2 wouldn't have been able to launch such a fierce attack. Sengoku could no longer tolerate it. If things continued like this, the 2 little devils would really rush him to the execution platform. At that time, although he was not afraid of the 2 brats, he was afraid that they would take the opportunity to release Ace. Immediately, Sengoku shouted at Aokiji and Kizaru. "You 2, hurry up and stop those 2 brats." Aokiji and Kizaru were originally in a slack-off state. Upon hearing this, he immediately frowned slightly, looked at Sumu and Luffy, and sighed softly. "Oh my, 2 little devils, how scary. Their attack is fierce." Kizaru glanced at Luffy indifferently, but the next second, he flashed in front of Luffy and unleashed a flash kick. Luffy had no way to dodge. His observation haki was still immature, and he didn't even have time to react. After all, Kizaru is too fast. However, Luffy doesn't have observation haki, but Sumu does. Marco and Boa Hancock's enhanced observation haki allowed them to clearly perceive Kizaru's attack movements. As Luffy stared blankly at the attack, a ball of blue flame suddenly rose from Sumu's body, and he kicked at Kizaru's attack. Wisps of electricity once again swirled around, unleashing a powerful and domineering aura. Yo, the attack was blocked. Impressive, really strong, but I'm not the only one here. As Kizaru's calm voice rang out, just as Sumu blocked the attack, wisps of ice began to condense in front of Sumu's eyes. Aokiji's lazy voice came, "It seems that you are the most threatening one. Then let's start by eliminating you. What a hassle." Upon hearing this, Sumu's eyes widened suddenly. The ice shards gathered in front of him to form the shape of a blue pheasant, who was holding an ice spike and pointing it at his head. Both of their top generals have made their move, and they all targeted him alone. Chapter 13 Shockingly Powerful Conqueror's Haki at the top. As the ice spikes hurtled toward him, Sumu was locked in a power struggle with Kizaru and had no time to move. Aokiji was also quite fast, making it difficult for him to dodge for a while. Just as the ice spikes were about to pierce Sumu's head and were in imminent danger, Sumu smiled faintly. He looked at Kizaru, his gaze suddenly darkening, and spoke softly. "I'm not the only one here." As soon as he said this, both Kizaru and Aokiji were slightly taken aback. But the next moment, the 2 felt a sharp attack coming towards them, and they opened their eyes slightly in surprise. Call. Luffy stopped hiding behind Sumu and stepped forward, sweeping his leg at the two of them. Crack. Whoosh. A crisp sound rang out, and the ice spike that King Z had used to pierce Sumu snapped in two under the force of the impact. As Luffy's attack swept across, the two of them were instantly blasted into a cloud of elements. Seeing this, Sumu twisted his body and landed with Luffy, instantly creating distance between them. Just now, Sumu had noticed Luffy's actions, which is why he felt so confident. Although Luffy doesn't possess Haki yet and can't harm Aokiji and Kizaru, his attacks can force them to transform into their elemental forms. If he becomes an element, then he will have enough time to escape. Sumu looked at the two generals in front of him again, his brows furrowing once more. One admiral is enough to overwhelm him, but now there are two. He and Luffy simply can't stop them. At this moment, the surrounding navy, seeing the admiral make a move, also gathered around, ready to assist in finishing off the enemy. Oh, I see. It seems we can't completely ignore Straw Hat Boy. Kizaru, whose upper body had been reduced to a ball of light, slowly reformed and then looked at Luffy expressionlessly. Aokiji returned to normal, looking at the two of them calmly. For them, the only threat at present is Sumu, who is by Straw Hat Boy's side. Page 24. This brat is domineering and can hurt them. Furthermore, Sumu's attack posed a significant threat to the entire naval group. They witnessed Sumu punching so many sailors until they were turned to stone. Moreover, this kid seems to have inexhaustible stamina, and he doesn't seem to get tired at all as he fights his way through. The two generals exchanged a glance, then nodded slightly, before transforming into a mass of elements and disappearing from the spot. Upon seeing this, Sumu's eyes suddenly darkened, and he became cautious. With two generals attacking at the same time, I wonder if he can withstand it. A yellow light flashed before Sumu's eyes, followed by the appearance of ice shards around the yellow light. Aokiji and Kizaru attacked Sumu together once again. Clearly, their goal was to eliminate the biggest threat first. Just then, Kizaru unleashed a flash kick, while Aokiji thrust his spike toward his heart. Sumu's eyes trembled slightly, and he quickly activated his armament Haki, causing blue flames to spread all over his body. He had no time to dodge at all. Not only was Kizaru's kick too fast, but Aokiji's attack even seemed to freeze his movements. These two generals are genuinely worried that they won't die. Boom. Sumu gritted his teeth, only to be kicked by Kizaru, while Aokiji's spikes pierced his chest with ferocious force. In an instant, Sumu felt a sharp pain, and his whole body was blasted out like a cannonball, leaving a long trail on the battlefield and raising dust everywhere. This commotion once again drew the attention of the pirates, and many of them looked in Sumu's direction with a hint of worry. That brat with the bowl cut, did he get hit by two generals? That's it, this is definitely a serious injury. As the dust settled, Sumu's kneeling figure slowly came into view. Cough cough. The blue flames on Sumu's body burned even more fiercely. Although he was clutching his chest and coughing, no blood came out of his mouth. Judging from his calm and composed expression, it was clear that enduring the blows from two generals had not caused him any major damage. When everyone caught a glimpse of Sumu's expression, they were all quite surprised and couldn't help but sigh. This brat withstood the attacks of two generals. I saw it just now, both blows landed squarely on him. He's actually all right. As Sumu listened to the words of the crowd, he slowly raised his eyes and glanced at the two generals. Blue flames swirled around him, like a shining blue star. Fortunately, he possessed the phoenix fruit, which had been enhanced, so withstanding the combined attack of the two admirals wasn't too difficult. Zoro, with his ordinary physique, was able to withstand a combined attack from Kaido and Big Mom, so it wasn't too exaggerated that he could withstand an attack from two admirals. Oh, it seems our attack wasn't very effective. This kid doesn't seem to be hurt at all. Kizaru glanced at Sumu, whose injuries were not visible, and a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. If you can't come once, then come a second time. Aokiji, on the other hand, spoke calmly, clearly wanting to end the battle as quickly as possible. If they delay any longer, who knows what kind of help they might get. Just as the two were about to make another move, a commotion suddenly came from the execution platform. The two admirals paused for a moment, and Sumu and Luffy were also slightly taken aback, before looking over at the same time. With a click, the deep, resonant voice of the Warring States period resounded. Now, this sound caused everyone on the battlefield to pause for a moment. Not far away, a white-bearded man, panting heavily, glanced at Sengoku, a vague sense of unease rising within him. Then, the voice of the Warring States period came again. Now, proceed with the execution of Portgas D. Ace. Begin the execution immediately. The sounds of the Warring States period seemed to possess a magical power, instantly plunging the noisy battlefield into a chilling silence for a moment. But after the silence, anxious, angry, and resentful voices exploded like a bomb on the battlefield. Whitebeard, Marco, Yozo, Vista, and the other members of the pirate crew all had their pupils shrink. Looking towards the execution platform, the two naval soldiers carrying out the execution had already gripped their sword hilts tightly, their sharp gazes seemingly able to pierce through the battlefield. Extremely creepy. Luffy and Sumu were startled and looked at the execution platform, wishing they could leap onto it. Sumu glanced at the two generals in front of him, his brows furrowed. Ace was going to be executed. But now, two admirals are blocking his way with Luffy. How can they get past them? In the blink of an eye, Sumu's amazing eyesight caught sight of two naval soldiers carrying out the execution, who had already raised their machetes. If no one intervenes in a few seconds, Ace will be executed. This happened so suddenly. Quick, think of something. What's the plot again? Asshole, stop it. Whitebeard looked at Ace on the execution platform and couldn't help but roar. But this roar caused him to feel unwell, and his vision became blurry, and his condition worsened again. Whitebeard coughed up a mouthful of blood, the pain causing him to kneel down, his conqueror's haki completely gone. Resentment, hatred, and anger all emanated from those gradually dazed eyes. Seeing that the sword was already pointed at Ace, the captains of the squads completely disregarded the enemies around them and used all their strength to run towards Ace. This premature execution during the Warring States period truly plunged the entire battlefield into chaos. The pirates, like ants on a hot pan, couldn't hide their anxiety as they faced the thick, solid object before them. If this continues, Ace will be executed. With Ace dead, their operation has ended in premature failure. All the fallen soldiers and meticulously planned schemes will be in vain. Wow! Just as the soldier's bayonet was about to touch Ace, whose life was in grave danger, a blue flame shot into the sky. But that wasn't all. Accompanying the blue flame was an extremely terrifying aura, powerful enough to penetrate the entire battlefield. That's the aura of a king. The aura of a king who reigns supreme. This aura, with its domineering force, instantly enveloped the entire battlefield. It even stirred up an incredibly powerful air wave. Just as this aura descended, the great sword that was about to strike Ace lost its power and fell to the side. The two naval soldiers next to him also had their eyes rolled back and then collapsed helplessly. And it wasn't just the two soldiers on the execution platform who fell to the ground. On this vast battlefield of Marineford, a large number of sailors also had their eyes rolled back, broke out in a cold sweat, and collapsed unconscious. As this terrifying aura swept past, the battlefield above fell silent. Everyone stared wide-eyed, their eyes trembling. Even powerful figures like Whitebeard, Akainu, Sengoku, and Garp were shocked. This is Conqueror's Haki. Furthermore, this Conqueror's Haki is incredibly powerful. So powerful that it gives off a feeling of being able to look down on everything. Who is it? Everyone was shocked and, relying on their observation Haki, looked toward the source of the Conqueror's Haki. Upon seeing the blue flame, Whitebeard and the others widened their eyes even more. Imp. A bowl cut. Indeed, the one radiating such a powerful and domineering aura was none other than Sumu. Page 25. At that critical moment, Sumu unleashed his Conqueror's Haki to save Ace from dire straits. At this moment, Sumu was surrounded by blue flames, panting slightly, and his eyes still retained the aura of a king. His gaze was fixed on the execution platform, and he only breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the Marines being executed next to Ace fall to the ground. Phew, caught up. Sumu let out a long sigh, patted his chest, and murmured. Just now, seeing that Ace was about to be executed, he was extremely anxious, constantly thinking about how Ace was saved in the original work. In his moment of desperation, he glanced at Luffy, whose eyes were wide open, and then suddenly remembered. In the original work, it was Luffy who unintentionally unleashed Conqueror's Haki during this crisis, which saved Ace. Yes, he also has Conqueror's Haki. Sumu wouldn't gamble on whether Luffy would actually unleash Conqueror's Haki as depicted in the story. After all, Luffy's Conqueror's Haki isn't fully developed yet. However, after being enhanced, he was able to skillfully control his Conqueror's Haki, which is why he chose to use it to stun the person being executed. Fortunately, he acted in time and saved Ace temporarily. His copy of Luffy's Conqueror's Haki was already powerful, but after being enhanced and further strengthened by his own abilities, it became even more exaggerated. However, this display of Conqueror's Haki did attract the attention of the entire navy. Even Sumu could clearly sense that Akainu, who didn't prioritize eliminating him, was also looking at him. On the execution platform, Sengoku was stared at by two admirals with equally sharp eyes. The eyes of these powerful naval officers were filled with intense killing intent. In the original story, Luffy unleashed his Conqueror's Haki, attracting the pursuit of all the Marines, who wanted to contain such a talented young man like Luffy while he was still a child. But now, it's him who's unleashing Conqueror's Haki, so doesn't that mean he's now the target of the Navy's attacks? Furthermore, his Conqueror's Haki is even stronger than the one Luffy showed back then. Sumu swallowed hard, keenly sensing that the shock of the surrounding Navy was rapidly turning into killing intent. He could almost hear what the Navy was thinking. This man is too much of a threat. If we allow it to continue growing, it will definitely become a major threat to the Navy in the future. Sengoku's face was ashen, his gaze fixed on Sumu, then he glanced briefly at Luffy. I didn't expect that besides Straw Hat Boy, who is a must-eliminate target, I would also get you, you brat. Sakazuki, it's time for you to make your move. On the other side, Akainu also frowned deeply. Without Sengoku needing to say anything, he looked at Luffy and Sumu, his tone cold. Straw Hat Kid, you two unknown brat, it's a good opportunity to eliminate you both together. Sumu naturally heard these words, and his expression immediately changed, his composure vanishing completely. He glanced at Aokiji and Kizaru, and couldn't help but take a deep breath. All three generals are after him. This is a real problem. Even if all three generals were healthy, Whitebeard wouldn't be able to withstand it. Sure enough, we made too much of a fuss and attracted too much attention. But thinking about it, it makes sense. If you follow Luffy, it's hard not to get noticed. Sumu tensed up, and Luffy beside him also looked serious. They naturally knew what they were about to face. Having come to rescue Ace, they were naturally prepared to deal with anything. Just as Akainu was about to make his move, a crack suddenly appeared in the air in front of him. Immediately afterward, a powerful shockwave, as strong as splitting mountains and cleaving rivers, struck Akainu. At that moment, Akainu's body seemed to deform, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. Upon seeing this, Sumu was immediately stunned. He looked at the attacker, who was already standing up with a resolute look in his eyes. But it wasn't over yet. Sumu then saw a gust of wind carrying sand and dust past Aokiji and Kizaru not far in front of him. Marco flapped his blue wings and appeared next to Kizaru at a speed imperceptible to the naked eye, kicking Kizaru hard in the stomach with his bird claws. Kizaru was also kicked away and rolled to the side, his yellow hair flashing continuously. The remaining Aokiji was not spared either. Diamond Yozu charged out of the dust raised by Marco like a raging bull. Half of its body had already turned into diamonds, and with unstoppable force, it smashed into Aokiji and sent him flying. Upon seeing this, Sumu and Luffy were slightly taken aback, and a look of surprise appeared on their faces. All three generals were sent flying, or were they stopped? At this moment, Whitebeard straightened his body, his naginata touching the ground, and his majestic and domineering appearance returned to normal. He took a deep breath and shouted it out. From now on, Whitebeard pirates, each division, give full cover for those two brats. In one fell swoop, rescue Ace. Chapter 14. I copied Garp. Whitebeard's voice swept across the battlefield like thunder, startling all the pirates. The captain's command, which governs all the squads, once again ignited the passion of the pirates. At this moment, they had only one goal, to cover Sumu and Luffy. Whitebeard's gaze fell heavily on Sumu. Clearly, he had placed all his bets on these two. Whether they can rescue Ace depends on the two of them. Upon hearing the command from the white-bearded captain, Sumu felt an immense sense of pride welling up within him. This is the recognition and trust that the world's strongest man has shown them. He's willing to mobilize the entire navy to send these two to the execution platform. It seems that this first stop after the time travel was worthwhile. It wasn't until Luffy called out from the side that Sumu snapped out of his reverie. Bowl cut, let's go. Sumu nodded vigorously, his energy increasing, and charged forward bravely once again with Luffy. Sumu remained completely calm as he watched the admirals and naval officers heading towards them, because he saw that all the pirate leaders under the Whitebeard pirates had already blocked the approaching marines at an extremely fast speed. At this moment, Sumu and Luffy were no longer alone charging to the front lines to face the encirclement of numerous marines. With Whitebeard's command, they already had enough help. With the admirals already delayed and the vice-admirals tied up in battle, the Whitebeard pirates have never been so united. The pirates had a clear objective: futile battles were pointless. They needed two powerful breachers like these to rescue Ace. The 7 warlords of the sea were also stopped, as Hawkeye originally intended to pursue Sumu and Luffy again. However, the Empress, who was also a helper of the navy, suddenly appeared and blocked him. Crocodile also stepped forward to block him because he didn't want to owe Luffy a favor. Almost every pirate was working hard to pave a road straight to the execution platform for Sumu and Luffy. Hawkeye, watching Luffy and Sumu charging forward and getting further and further away from him, narrowed his eyes and murmured in admiration. These two people constantly turn the people around them into their partners. They possess the most terrifying power on this sea, especially that brat. Eagle Eyes stared at Sumu. Did no one recognize this kid or even know his name? Despite this, the Whitebeard pirates and the others still trusted him so much, as did Straw Hat Luffy. At this moment, Sumu looked at the road in front of him, which had never been so open before, and couldn't help but sigh. This is the cohesion of the Whitebeard pirates. A group of pirates blocked the advancing marines in front, while Ivankov and Lightning brought up the rear. They literally carved out a path for the two of them. The navy's cannons kept firing, but Sumu didn't feel a single shell exploding beside him. Looking up, they saw another group of pirates leaping into the air, intercepting cannonballs mid-flight, and a series of cannonballs exploding in the air. On the battlefield, everyone was united in their determination to rescue Ace, and their spirit had reached its peak at this moment. Without the obstruction of those henchmen, this time, Sumu and Luffy charged to the bottom of the execution platform with unstoppable momentum. The tall execution platform was right in front of us. We were only a short distance away from reaching Ace's side. They fought their way to this point, and now they were just one step away from victory.
Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get: an unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.